the Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast?
Yes, this is a simulcast, which is cool because that means one of us doesn't have to sit here like a mannequin asking questions while the other talks the whole time. We can actually have a conversation like regular people. And
yeah,
I like that.
Who would believe that, right?
Right, on a podcast and nobody can complain because we told them up front, so it's not really an interview. I guess it's more of a conversation. So, but I'm curious. Sure. I intentionally didn't ask you any questions because I wanted to ask them here. How long have you been in Korea?
Oh, it's been it's several years. I came here for a study program for like a year, and then I went back to the States, and then I came back, and it's been like several years already. And you've been in India, what?
Yeah.
Like probably. How long have you been in India?
I first entered into India in April of 2018. And then I had to leave. I went back to California for, I think, 2.5 months to take care of some stuff to facilitate moving here permanently.
Wow.
And so I came here permanently at the end of November of 2018. So then, I mean, well in time for, then when COVID came around, everybody was surprised. And, India was real quick to shut down any, even Indians who have the OIC, who reside somewhere US or Canada, aren't allowed to come back into India. So
wow,
it's a good thing I was here, and I wasn't like there or anything else, but.
Right. And now I heard that they're going to reopen or something. That was the plan. Like they said, they're going to start allowing international, tourists for the first time in like over like a year and a half or a year or something like that.
Here or there?
In India, I saw some article about that. Like maybe at the end of this month or something like that. They're planning to reopen.
We got spoiled. We live in Goa, which is like such a huge tourist place, but we moved here with zero tourism. The only tourists are Indian tourists. It's completely shut down. So we've been living here. We like have a place here now and everything. So we've never experienced Goa in its natural state of being filled with tourists, which will probably be doubled with what it normally is on a busy day.
So, what I heard is Goa is like that's where pretty much like all the whites go, right? The white people go to Goa.
Yeah.
What's the appeal of Goa? How did it become this like big
originally
draw?
it was the Portuguese built a fort here. There was a city called Ela, and it was a Muslim stronghold, and then the Portuguese took it. And then so I mean, I've been slowly learning more and more, and it's fascinating. This was the heart of the Inquisition in the world. In Spain, they killed a couple thousand people. Here it was 15,000, and they would ship people here from other colonies to be tried and executed under suspicion of being Jewish. So it has like a really bizarre history, but that history evolved slowly into a very interesting culture which exists today, where there's Catholic neighborhoods and there's Hindu neighborhoods. Everybody's pretty much a quarter Portuguese, and the local language is a combination of the local language from 700 years ago and Portuguese. I mean, the Portuguese were here consistently from the 1400s until like the 1960s. So it's like different from Brazil, different from like California has that old Spanish side of town, kind of like the original buildings, but the Portuguese flavor here is very strong. But everybody's Indian, but a little bit Portuguese, and everybody's like, their mom is Catholic, and not everybody, but like there's a lot of people where their mom is Catholic and their dad is Hindu. And then further, it was the first place that the hippies flooded into, I think even before Rishikesh. So then that has evolved into like. I was explaining it to Piu, and then she went, "Oh, okay, that's how it happened." Because it's a tropical. There's old churches, the very old churches, like rivaling those in Europe, and tropical, beautiful, rivers and lakes and ocean. And then there's all these clubs where people go and listen to this and take like 17 different drugs. And so I was explaining that the hippies came and they smoked weed and maybe took a little acid and played the guitar. And that happened. That seed was planted, at this point, 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. And so that evolved into like the Goa party rave scene, I think. But it's sort of like, if you don't go to those clubs, then you don't really see it. You hear it. Like from where we are, we're in Anjuna, which there was now I'm talking like I'm the guest. I'm going to make you talk later. No,
I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, when we originally decided to move to Goa, and I was looking at Anjuna because of the prices, and there was an Israeli couple at the same yoga training that Pio and I were doing, and they said, "Oh, Anjuna is pretty rough, like a lot of music, a lot of Russians." And it's Russians. There's mostly Russians in Goa, actually. So I mean, the old definition of white was non-Irish, non-Catholic, WASP. So, but I think now people just go by skin tone. So I think that people, I mean, it's easy to do. You see a Russian, you go, "Oh, look, it's a white guy," but what does that even mean anymore? It just means it's melanin at this point. It's not, which I don't know. That's a whole other subject, but yeah, there's a lot of interracial couples here. The foreigners that are here today, pretty much, I would say half of them are married to someone who's Indian, and then the other half are people who were here when COVID hit, and they either chose not to go back or they couldn't go back for whatever reason. So there's people that are like that are poor, like people from Russia that have no money, that are being
just stranded, basically
taken care of by the kindness of of people here. Yeah, like they were staying at a hostel or an inn, and then they ran out of money, and then they just said, "Well, you can stay here. I'm not going to kick you out." And so India was very nice about that, about letting the foreigners stay here who wanted to. And
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've traveled a lot too. I've always wanted to go to India, of course, but I've traveled a lot extensively, and just from like talking to a lot of other friends who travel a lot, India is one of those countries that's very polarizing in the fact that, like, I don't know, like an example would be like Thailand. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's pretty cool, food's good, there's things to do." Like most people enjoy it. There's other countries people don't enjoy as much, but India is like either people really like it or they hate it. Like I've never really heard anybody say like, "Oh, it was just okay, it was decent." They either say like, "Fuck that." Like I have friends that I think fuck that place, I'm never going back.
I wrote a poem. I wrote this thing about a 22-year-old from the perspective of a 22-year-old vegan yogi who comes to India and becomes completely disillusioned and realizes that the India in their head was a fantasy, and that the real India is crap. And I posted it just with no context, and I thought it was funny, but people were like posting sad face. "I'm so sorry, brother." I'm like, it's a parody of Heather. I wish it were pleather. She goes to a leather shop. What do you? And they're like, "No, it's not cow, it's buffalo, so it's okay." It's like, "I wish it were pleather," And so now I want to get back. I want to get fit again and start playing the guitar and practice so I can record it. Because it's
that's pretty funny. That's like this sort of yuppie fantasy of this fantasy land or something like that. And that's what's funny when I go and visit, because I've lived abroad for a very long time as well. So what's funny is I'll go back to visit America, and like all the people that are like claiming to protect culture and the yuppies, like they've actually never even really been anywhere. Like they don't know how, like, they have an image of their head how these countries are, and then things like that. Seeing it from my wife's point of view, when people, she came to yoga training with me and she was wearing clothes, like you do. And so the Israeli / Californian, yoga teacher that was already a yoga teacher that was getting more credentials kind of thing, was like, "What are you dressed as? You look like a hipster from New York."
As it, oh, you mean
Oh,
like a
that's funny.
person? You like because she's not wearing a sari? Like it was weird. And then people
Right.
posting on the Rishikesh group saying, you know, it was so disheartening to go to Rishikesh and see Indian women wearing shorts. It's like, do you like in the name of liberal, some kind of supposed progressive idea of preservation of your idea of cultures, you want India to look like the illustrations in the Bhagavad Gita, and you're condemning Indians for like
Yeah.
what, you know, like getting a job in tech and, you know, shifting
Mhm.
to Delhi, or I'm so confused, you know, it's
Yeah.
it's like that point where the right and the left sort of meet in this shit place,
Mhm.
you know.
Right. No, for sure,
They
for sure.
find an agreement, and they're smug, you know, thinking they're the center of the earth, and that they have to either, you
Mhm.
know, either they're still on the white man's burden trip, or they're
Right.
so far on an upside down version of that that they think that they have
Mm.
to go out of their way to like remove the Western influence from everyone else or something.
Mm.
And it's like,
Yeah,
you
right.
can't, you're not going to be able to do that. Nobody wants
Mhm.
you to help doing that. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
And yeah,
Right. It's a lot of projection of what they think
imagine.
rather than what the reality is, right?
Yeah.
Like what they
And
want it to
honestly
be.
speaking, frankly, I think that people feel so much guilt because of the institution of slavery and the genocide of the Native Americans, that
Sure.
everything becomes this polarization of the powerful evil white cartoon character
Mhm.
versus the brown victim cartoon character. And anything that looks like that, they only see the melanin, you know,
Mhm.
shades, and then will frame whatever is going on, whether it be a marriage or a conversation or an argument about whatever,
Mhm.
in terms of like the evil of colonialism,
Right.
and it's like
Right.
really annoying, and it's really nice to get away from it. I think you've probably, I
Mhm.
assume, have had a similar experience of getting away from it. It depends. What state are you from?
Yeah, I'm from California, so
Oh
here's the
yeah,
thing,
same
like
thing.
the only exposure I have to like everything we're talking about nowadays is really just through the internet, just like Facebook
Exactly,
or
but it
anything. But
used to be a
I'm
Trader
living in
Joe's.
like
Yeah.
like I'm isolated from all these cultural
Oh,
wars and this weird
oh,
stuff that's going
it's
on.
so good to have some
It's like
distance.
watching it from the outside, basically,
Yeah,
I mean, where I'm
yeah,
not even a part of it, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot
Oh,
more comfortable, I would say, being on the outside.
oh yeah. Because you go to a
Yeah,
party and people are getting
right.
high and playing drums, but then you find yourself immersed in a I don't know what to call it, like a super ego, you know, projection thing, where a group identity thing, where like if you're not completely nodding in agreement with whatever everybody's
Mm.
talking about, and you're kind of like, people are like, oh, I saw you did a there, you disagree with, you know, our hard left stance on everything. And
You're
it's like,
right.
well,
Right,
some
right.
things, little, you know, I think maybe communism has had its turn at the wheel and failed. Maybe we
Mhm.
should maybe develop something new, you know, like
Right, right, right.
like not go
Right, a lot
backwards,
of
like try
tribalism
things that have
going
already
on.
failed. Like again, why, you know?
Right, right,
So
right.
yeah,
But I've checked out. We have a mutual friend that introduced us, and I
Fredder
checked out.
RC.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I
Yeah.
checked out your YouTube channel too. And
Oh,
as I
cool.
mentioned, I love travel. I live in Asia. I love travel. And they're like, I've been to quite a few countries, but some of the countries I really want to go to that and haven't been are the ones
Mm,
that you have been to and that are on your
mm,
YouTube channel. So I was like
mm,
really
mm.
excited about
Oh,
that, right?
good.
Like,
Oh, good.
so for example, how many um man, I know so many travelers. I don't know anyone other than you, and maybe one other person who's been to Bhutan. That's
Mm,
really fascinating to me because
mm.
you need number one, like you need like a special tourism visa to get there, I think, and you need
Just
to pay like
money.
this victor fee or
It's
something. It's basically all just money, right? Yeah.
it's money, but the thing is, they since they cover, you stay in all the best hotels. There was one
Uh-huh.
point where they were like, we're really sorry, we can't give you the hotel room that we normally give people, so we have to give you like the prime minister's room. And I was like, oh well, that's fine, you know. And they had
Yeah.
like, there was the TV in the bathroom, a TV, you know, I mean,
Mhm.
it was nuts.
Yeah.
And then I mean, ridiculous things. Like I was by myself, completely 100% by myself. So imagine, I mean, it's a little weird. I'll just tell you like one little snapshot of the experience where my guide was a guy I met on Instagram who talked me into coming to Bhutan in the first place because he saw I had a podcast called What Would Yeshi Do? And he liked
yeah,
that.
right.
You know? And he asked me, he's a white guy talking about Yeshi Dzogyo, what's going on? You know, so we became friends. And so he was my guide, and then there was a driver. So we would go to these restaurants. There was one restaurant in particular with a beautiful view, and then but they weren't allowed to sit with me. They had to go eat in a separate room, you know, because they would like have the cheaper food apparently. And then so I sat down, you know, by myself with this big beautiful table, and they come and bring out these like elaborate metal, like gold and silver, like think platters of pork and beef and chicken and fish and this and that and this bread and that bread. And I'm like, I am not 20 carnivores, like what? And I was feeling really bad, and then someone came up and said they feed it to the dogs, whatever people don't eat. And I said, oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what it's like. That's also what you're paying for. So
it's a very luxurious, like
it's a very luxurious thing, and you don't even spend a dime. You don't even spend any money.
You just show up, you have all the accommodation, the food, the
they
tour
drive
stuff.
you where you're going, they explain everything to you. I mean,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for them, I think when North Korea does it, it's because they're hiding something. But I like to give Bhutan the benefit of the doubt, and they just kind of want to keep the tour. They saw what tourism did to Nepal and India, and they kind of want to stay Bhutan, you know. So they have a very tight. Bali is talking about doing that now, or they don't. They only want people who are staying in fancy hotels. They don't want the backpackers, you know, the kids. So it'll be, that might increase the amount of tourism coming here to Goa, but I don't know.
I can see. I mean, it's considered like the happiest country on earth. They have like this happiness index, and it's super pristine apparently and stuff. I mean, I can see if you look at like Thailand or other parts of the world where
the king was,
it's just overrun by some.
Their GDP was very poor. It would put them in the same category as like you know, a lot of the poorest countries. And so when the king came to, I forget, like a UN something rather in the 1970s, the father of the current king, and he had this brilliant idea, the gross national happiness index. And he had this great speech talking about, you know, we're carbon negative, like they produce more, or they use up carbon. They don't produce carbon. I don't know how that can be, but there's little loopholes. Like, for example, they don't kill at all at any time. I mean, plants are okay, and probably insects, but like mammals, and you know, there's no killing. So no fishing, no and so where does all this meat come from? You know, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
From India. They have truckloads of meat come in across the border every morning to fill up all the restaurants in Bhutan. And the other thing, there's no smoking. So smoking, but everybody still smokes. There's like a night, you know, crowd. And because they knew me, because Sharing knew me, I think that wouldn't have normally been part of the tour, but like we went out at night and he showed me like what the seedy parts, you know,
they're like little bars,
bars
small bars,
like with people, like women dancing, but they're fully clothed all the way down to their ankles, like full dress, but you can pay to dance with them on stage. It's like really bizarre. And but they were named Yeshi and stuff like that. So it's like something you're looking at you're looking into Vajrayana, but in modern, it's so Vajrayana there, 100%. But I think
the state religion, it's the only country that has the state religion being Vajrayana, Tantric Buddhism.
They're imperial.
And there's that Padmasambhava Temple. What is it, like the lion? That one on the hill. I think you had went there.
That was so beautiful. They have. I'm trying to remember the name of the drug. The state religion is a form of Sakya, I believe, but they have like a Nyingma presence, strong Nyingma presence. So those are basically the two main forms there. But it's I always describe it as if Hayao Miyazaki imagined Tibet in you know, like in his mind, like it would look like Bhutan, you know.
Right. Wasn't
it's
it?
so
It was
beautiful.
part of the Kingdom of Tibet originally too. I think it was called like Eastern Tibet. It was
Oh,
actually part of the original, as far as I know.
there's a
It was.
story. There was a guy, the great unifier. So in a Bhutan temple, you have the Padmasambhava, you have the second Dharma king. You know, they honor the same characters as in a regular Tibetan temple, but then they have this guy with a gray beard, an older guy, and he's the great
Okay.
unifier. And I forget his name, but his story was that he was one of two people considered to be the current incarnation of Avalokiteshvara in Tibet at the time. And I think sometimes that's okay, but not in this case. And so he got kind of run out of town, and his dad was well known in Bhutan, or his grandfather. So they knew his name. And so they really liked him. But then Tibet was going to invade. They were sending armies. I mean, back then it was probably different kingdoms. There was like probably more than just Tibet and Bhutan, but like this king and that king and different regions and stuff. But he taught everybody what he knew from Tibet, and he organized everybody into like the brown robes and the orange robes and the yellow robes, and put together their whole system. So they called him the Great Unifier, and then he helped them to fight off the Tibetans so that they could say, this far and no further, this is Bhutan, you know.
Wow, so, that's a trip. Wow.
Yeah, and it was only like 400 years ago, I think. It was pretty recent. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty recent. But
yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, that's it's definitely on the top like 3 or 4 places I want to visit. Yeah, and you also went to Nepal too. I mean,
that was fun. I lived there for like 4 months and worked. I taught yoga.
Oh, you worked there too. It wasn't just a trip. Okay.
Well, no, it was. People might get tired of hearing the story, but I'm on your podcast too, so I'll tell the story. I'll tell the short version though. I left the Golden Dawn order that was a bit culty that I was in. I was in for 18 years. And so I left. And then over a period of time, I was like, now with this freedom, you know, I think I'm going to quit my job, you know. And then I quit my job and I was like, you know, they got this taste of freedom. I think I'm going to get divorced, you know. And then I got divorced. And I think I'm going to sell my house. I think I'm going to buy a one-way ticket and just fucking leave California and never come back. And I'm going to go sit on a mountaintop. And everybody was like, what's happening to you? Are you crazy? And so I'm worried about you. And so I went to Africa for 10 days, and episode 98 and 97, I believe, of Esoterinerd are all about that. And so then I went to Nepal because the Buddha was born there. And so I thought it proper. I think it was a kind of out of.
And they have that. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, no. I think it was in one of your episodes. I think I was watching it. There's the is it the Bodhi tree? Is that what they were showing? Like, you went to something, they said that's the tree the Buddha was under. Like, it's supposed to be the Bodhi tree. But
well, they have a big Bodhi tree. They have a big Bodhi tree in Lumbini, but the proper original Bodhi tree would have been in Bodh Gaya, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Because that's where he attained enlightenment. And then in Sarnath, he began teaching. And then there's one other place where he passed away. But then there was the time where they were traveling all over India, and fun stories about how they would always move on after a week or two. And I think that that's like an old yoga thing too. A proper yogi doesn't stay in one place longer than 2 weeks. I mean, like a full-fledged yogi, you know, who does the bamboo enema in the Ganga every morning, you know. They're not supposed to like live with anybody. But then during monsoon season, the Buddha, you know, when he was alive, said, well, okay, we have to make an exception during monsoon season. And so there was all kinds of shenanigans that came up with the disciples having to stay with with ladies, and, you know, things that would come up, and then that would establish laws. And the original, not Theravada, but the one, Hinayana is not a nice term, but they
say Theravada.
Theravada is one of them. I think there's 2 names for those original schools, but those are in Bodh Gaya, as far as I understand. And I mean, they originated in Bodh Gaya, and then Mahayana also was established. There was a university established in Bodh Gaya, old stone place. I want to go. I've seen pictures of my wife there, but I haven't been yet. Her family's from
Oh
there.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just can't pull it
Yeah,
up right now in my head.
it's a
Yeah,
trip to me that her ancestors thousands of years ago. I mean, her ancestors literally when Buddha was there, like they were down the street, you know, and they were like she's Yadav, that's Krishna's caste. So back then they were Krishna's caste. So I can just imagine like it's a pretty safe bet to say that one of my wife's ancestors, when they heard about this new guy, Buddha, who was preaching down the street, was like, oh, I don't need that. You know, I'm part of Krishna's caste.
Yeah, contemporaries basically.
Yeah, like yeah, he was a little bit earlier, I think. Well, thousands of years earlier. I think 5,000 years, is that the Mahabharata? I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, Mahabharata, yeah, it's much older.
Old,
definitely
yeah.
Thousands at least, yeah.
History has a different meaning here. I mean, in California, it's like this is 100 years old.
Right.
Wow, 100 years.
Right. Yeah, for them, 1,000 years in India, like 1,000 years is relatively new, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was a new guy from the 1200s.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious, like, because you were in Nepal for a while.
Yeah.
Like comparing Nepal and India, like, what are some major contrasts between those two?
Yeah. Well, the Nepal, the Indian government was put together over a period of 100 some odd years, 100 years by the British, and then they just sort of made it okay by British, and they kind of kept going with that government, and then started adding to it and taking things away. Like just a couple of years ago, the British had said that it was illegal to have gay sex. They took that law away 2 years ago, but it takes time and it takes votes and it takes energy and money to like change the laws. But then on the other hand, the British also made it illegal for a woman to throw herself on the burning pyre, which a lot of people, when you talk one-on-one with people who are educated and are familiar with history and stuff, they say, you know, honestly, that's one thing I can say the British did that I'm thankful for. Yeah, nobody wants that, you know, I mean, but that used to be like standard, kind of accepted. It was either you shave your head and wear white and live where the widows live, or you throw yourself on the burning pyre. That was basically, either one of those was okay, but certainly don't wear a sari and keep your hair long and remarry. That was like forbidden. So the British, the Western corruptive influence, you know, started to make women think maybe that was fucked and ought to change, you know. And so one-on-one, usually people, there's not the same hatred of the British that you find in liberal white Californians, you know, that they expect, you know, because they're trying to talk in a way that will make happy the angriest of the disenfranchised in their community, and projecting that on the whole rest of the world. And if they were thinking about aliens, they'd probably project that on that too. Have I been talking this whole time? Did I let you talk at all? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. For some reason it's telling me to upgrade to Pro. This is kind of weird because we only have 2 people, and it usually comes up with this when you have 3.
If it cuts off your recording, I'll send you mine because it seems to still be recording mine.
Oh, okay. If it cuts off,
I don't know if I have Pro. We can always turn it off and back on.
We don't need Pro. Yeah. It might cut us off, then we have to restart, but that's okay. We'll have 2 files basically or something.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But anyways, I'm very interested to hear all of this because there are places I want to go and
so Nepal. What I was going to say though, so that was my illustration of India's government. The Nepal government was the king, who, I don't know if you've heard this, there was a king whose son went crazy and murdered the entire royal family. So the history is there were 27 some odd kingdoms, I think maybe 23 or 24. And then there was one king of a region with a city, Gorkha, where the beer comes from. I mean, the name of the beer, Gorkha, where the Gurkha come from, that they have the curved blades, and the British were impressed by them. Anyway, so that king took over Nepal, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, a few hundred years ago, and like united it all and made it Nepal. And then he moved into the capital, but then there was the British kind of occupying. So the capital is a British style thing. But then the British left, and then the royal family killed themselves. I mean, one of the kids, it's tragic. Wow. I don't mean to make light of it. It was a traumatic experience, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And so they established a republic. You know, they were like, all right, let's not do that again, you know. And then so the Chinese, of course, are right there. And so China was like, hey, can we you know, build here? We're going to just do some stuff. Hey, we're just going to use this. Hey, this village here, we should have that, right? And Nepal's like, okay, can we get something out of it? And they're like, yeah, this might. And so, but then somehow or other, while I was there, this was interesting for me because my grandfather was in China when the communists hadn't taken over yet, but they were a force to be reckoned with. And they certainly didn't like him because he was a Standard Oil executive and everybody kind of knew his name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he had to deal with them like in real ways. And so I'm walking down the street. I wanted to learn Hindi. And so I wanted to learn the Hindi alphabet. So I went to a bookstore for tourists in the tourist part of Pokhara, you know, which is a lake in Nepal. And they said, oh, you need to go down this street really far. And I was like, okay. And go to a local bookstore, not us. And so I walked and walked and walked. And there was a few hundred Nepali people chanting and cheering. And there was someone with a megaphone and they were all flying the sickle and hammer. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, I'll turn left then and see if I can go around this. And then but yeah, sure enough, a lot of people are really not just communist, but Maoist. It's a Maoist party. And so they voted for a Maoist prime minister in their republic. But every year on October 10th, they sacrifice 1,000 goats for the military. So, so basically, from my starry-eyed, you know, 5 years ago, I mostly, you know, I had seen The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy, and I knew Buddha was from Nepal, and I kind of had a very misty-eyed. Nepal is a very ancient, mysterious land where, you know, spirits are just, you know, there. I didn't know what to think. It was just that projection. But then having lived in Nepal and then come to India, and of course in India there's a lot of diversity. So there's like a lot of people that are living the same way that their ancestors did 3,000 years ago, or you know, at least a long time ago, but plus cell phones, you know, and Facebook. So that's interesting. But the more like urban, like the people in Delhi, the people in the big cities that, you know, you could call them westernized, you know, if you use that vernacular, but you know, the people who have, you know, buildings like everyone else, and they think of Nepal as like the little brother of India. They're like, oh, they're cute, you know. It's sort of like retro, you know. It's like old school. Like old school. Yeah. Like in India, they do like a little dot, and in Nepal they'll take a handful of mud and plop it on their forehead and walk around all day with it, you know, as their blessing. So it's like, whoa, you need all of that whole thing, you know. I mean, from an Indian perspective, and I personally, I found that 90% of the people who I ended up like considering my friend that I met in Nepal that were Nepali, really just kind of 100% after my money. And it got to be disheartening.
So do you feel like in that regard, very touristy, trappy, kind of like parts of Southeast Asia? You get that kind of vibe?
It was kind of my first, I had been to Japan, but it was my first foray into like deep Asia kind of, you know, but you know, it was a little bit, I mean, in Tamil, that's where all the tourists go. So all the people who were tourist predators, you know, who are like the people who are going to have a scam, you know, they're all right there in Tamil. So you can't walk down the street without 20 people offering you hash, and then someone trying to take you aside to explain why they need you to, you know, like pay for their kids' tuition and everything. And I mean, I had one where there was a Tibetan monk, and he looked like just like every Tibetan monk that you see. And I was wearing a Tibetan shirt, and he was so happy. He was smiling, and he was like, let's talk. And then he took me off the main road to like a private area. And I was like, what is going, okay. And he was like, oh, you know, and he was talking about, and he was happy that I, you know, anything that I said about, oh, my dad was Tibetan Buddhist, and, oh, that's so great. Oh, you're like a brother, you know, here, I'll give you, do you have a Tibetan name? I'll give you a Tibetan name. And then he started explaining my cataracts right here. And that's where it was like, okay, well, here's the whole reason for the for the very first smile and the very first hello. And it's a little disheartening after a while. It's like I went there expecting to have some mystical experience on a mountain, but my first like a jolt of like the first few weeks was just realizing at least how not the rest of the world, but how a certain slice of the world views me, as hey, this guy has money. This is Mr. Moneybags here. Do you see his shoes?
Right.
Let's get him for everything he's got, and I experienced less of that in India. I came to India and I met a man named Yash of the Verma caste, goldsmiths. I'm interested in these arcane things, but they're sort of arcane. It's Harry Potter's ancestor probably made pots, so it's not so different. Not so different.
Got the Potter.
Exactly. But anyway, I've been talking. Well, anyway, he found out I smoked weed and he invited me to come home with him. And his dad works in the Navy, and it was just like I stayed with him, and he was just happy to hang out, and smoke weed, whatever, and it was so that was nice. What ended up happening in Nepal was I ended up befriending other tourists. Finally, when I went there, at first I was ignoring the other tourists, like I'm not one of them, but then after a week it shook me out of that. And then there was a hostel. I had never stayed at hostels. I had never thought to stay at hostels. I don't know why, and then I went and stayed at one, and I made 20 friends all simultaneously, all at once. They're still my friends from all over the world. Nice.
That's what's so cool about hostels. You just get in there and meet different kind of people, and it's a good rather than staying alone. Like when I travel, it depends on the country, but sometimes I like to stay at a hostel for a few nights. But sometimes you want your own place too. Like it's kind of cool to or you can get the hostel ones that have like the private rooms and stuff. That's nice as well.
That's true. You get a little bit of both, so you can go into the main.
Yeah, you get. Yeah, exactly.
Hang out with people and then go be alone. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you're in the Golden Dawn for like 18 years.
One of them.
So what's interesting, we both have this very deep. Probably we both have this very deep interest in like Hermeticism, but then also Eastern religions. Too, right?
Yeah. I picked that up from my.
It should be.
Okay, good.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Sweet. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So, do you remember what were we talking about? Nepal, India?
Oh yeah, we left off like we both have a lot of interests. I mentioned that you had mentioned that you were Golden Dawn for all those years.
Oh yeah.
We both have
Hermeticism,
and then also like yoga and Vajrayana, Hinduism, things like that, right? So kind of interesting. So about your time, you said you were in the Golden Dawn for 18 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And you said it's like a cult version. Like, what's the story behind that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of like, I mean, there's of course the layers of the definition of the word cult.
Sure.
There's the classic old Roman, like the cults of Isis, a group of people with a shared belief practicing together that, okay, well, that includes every religion too. And then there's the post Charles Manson sort of connotation of occults, which is like, okay, well, there's a scale. There's like, okay, are they just kind of ripping you off and controlling you?
Sure.
Or are they also making you drink poison? And so it's like, then there's a scale from 1 to 10.
To the cult game, basically.
Yeah. How insidious is it? How traumatic is it? How long is the process of deprogramming afterward? That kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, so I would say, on that scale, I don't know enough about the Cicero order. I think that because they don't meet very often and they don't have mandatory meetings, that they're very close to 0 on the cult scale. But having a hierophant and a chief adept and a hierarchical structure and a spiritual communal secret organization, you are on the cult scale, sure. That's a cult. That's, by the broader definition that doesn't have the nasty connotation. Then whether or not the nasty connotation is there kind of depends on the leadership, although it can also depend on the rest of everybody, but mostly on the leadership, 99% on the leadership, I'd say. But yeah, my dad he and his mom used to go to Builders of the Atom, the Paul Foster Case one. They're near my old house in California. The one in Highland Park, the original one. And so he colored in the tarot decks and he colored in the Tree of Life, and he was familiar with that stuff, and he read tarot. And then he delved into Vajrayana Buddhism shortly before I was born. And then he died when I was about 15. Okay. So my whole life, at least the first part of my life, maybe the first half, not touch wood as they say here, was all about one-upping my dad. So I think that I have less interest in Hermeticism than most other people who are involved in Hermeticism. Certainly anybody who reads books about Hermeticism, because I've never read one. I joined when I was 16, and it was 1994, so they told us, don't look at the internet, don't look at books. You know, just get it from us, and you'll get the of the true, one true and holy. And so, you know, there were idiots like me that followed the orders, and then there were others that didn't, and most of them left. And so, yeah, you know, it sort of got stupider over time. I remember there was one point where there was a schism, and I mean, I don't mean to insult all of those people, but I was kind of looking at the people who were left, and it was either people who didn't speak English as their first language by a lot, you know, people who kind of didn't get the who was he, why was he yelling, who were those people, what's everybody so upset about? And then the cult leader came back and you know, was telling everybody, oh, well, you know, they're gone now, so now we can get down to the work. But I didn't leave. I stayed behind, and I stood up and I got in his face, and I was like, you're the one who started the rumor that you put your cum in the goddamn stuff that you gave everybody to drink, you know? And like, if you don't want that rumor going around, why did you start the rumor, asshole? You know, and then he starts shaking, and he's clutching his rosary, you know, and he's sweating, you know, and wearing his white robe, and he wasn't expecting like so much opposition, especially from me, because I was kind of his like buddy for a few years before that. And then you know, then it was interesting because he just started spouting old tapes, like old like pre-recorded things about next year's Power Week is going to be even better than last year. You know, like every August we had Power Week was the thing, you know, and everybody from all the members from around the world who could afford it would fly in and then get thoroughly traumatized over the course of the week. No, it was fun usually for most of the people, but it was the kind of thing that the higher up you were, the more dark it got. I had one teacher who's now a bishop, actually, but in the Episcopal Church I mentioned, I think, he was my teacher in the Golden Dawn, and he told me that that Golden Dawn temple was a lot like the opposite of Nebuchadnezzar's vision. It has the feet, the feet are gold, because the neophytes, they're the ones that are glowing, because in their minds they've just joined a magical order, you know, so they're the ones that are lit up, and the ones that have been here for a few years, and especially the ones toward the top, they're just they're the lead mixed with clay, you know, that's the head of the lead mixed with clay and the feet of gold. So that was a fun analogy. But
wow, it sounds like a trippy. So how about currently you're not that interested as much in Hermeticism, maybe due to all the, you know, well, you're immersed in it for quite a long time, but
that's the thing, is it shaped my thinking quite a lot. And I have the ability to kind of help people who you know, like are immersed in it. I always used to say that the Golden Dawn, and this might sound rude, but I used to say that the Golden Dawn was sort of the cure for Christianity. No, I'll qualify that. What I mean by that is if somebody was sort of traumatized by parents or grandparents that were immersed in a bad form of usually Protestant Christianity. Although, you know, I wasn't around a lot of Catholics growing up, and I know that they have their own issues, but it's usually pretty much just one issue that they've got there. And there's like a few general abstract things like guilt and not reading the Bible, but the Protestants, they get really kinky, you know, with their trauma. So for those folks, the Golden Dawn can be a real godsend. But for somebody who just sort of like grew up meditating and you know, kind of like I don't know, observing the world and looking at flowers and stuff like that, the Golden Dawn might not be necessary or useful. I mean, you know, but it certainly can help with somebody who's dealing with a lot of bad you know, scripture-based you know, twisted scripture. Is that That should be a band name.
Twisted Scripture. That sounds like a pretty cool band name, actually.
Yeah, Twisted Scripture. Oh,
that
or
sounds
a
like a really good
podcast
band
name.
name, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. I like that.
But yeah, so in that sense, I mean, I wasn't that's the thing is my dad was half Buddhist, you know, and half Hermetist. And but my grandma was very fundamentalist Christian, you know. And so she had this whole like, you've got to put Jesus in your heart, you know.
Right.
And my dad was like the cool magician, you know, that I'll do this and that. So I found that happy medium in the Golden Dawn, where, you know, everybody, when you get to a certain grade, you get an identical cross tattoo on your heart, you know, put Jesus in your heart. And yet, you know, we were occultist magicians, and even black magicians at times. And by that I mean evil. I don't mean anything else. The Brotherhood of the Black Sun Kuho, you no relation to the Black Sun in World War II era Germany. They're the group in South Africa that I went and hung out with. And one of their things is they call it the Black Sun specifically. And people go, well, is it evil? And it's like, well, the fact that you asked that question is the reason why we're the Church of the Black Sun. Is no. You know, like beyond the light, there is darkness. And that darkness, that primordial darkness from which the light came, is where we orient ourselves. We're not obsessed with the light. We're looking beyond the light into the ayin, to the no thing. And then as a Kabbalist, I'm like, that's great. I love that, you know. and you know, because he was coming from a Buddhist perspective. So it was a South African man who went to Japan and stayed in Tenzin. Is that right? Tenzin? No, that's the son of the Avatar. And our driver in Bhutan was Tenzin. So it's not Tenzin. It starts with a T, but it was the guy who was initiated by Kukai, and then he went down and built that. He started the regular, more normal form of Japanese Buddhism that's only a little bit Vajrayana. It starts with a T.
It's God.
It's like mostly Mahayana.
Like Tengen or Tengen?
Maybe something close to that. Somebody knows. If you know, please comment down below. Anyway.
Right. It's their like esoteric Buddhism, basically.
A little bit, yeah. And so he was staying there, and every morning, you know, or every night, or whenever it was, once a week, they would all chant the Hanya Shingyo together.
Tendai, maybe. Is it called Tendai?
Yeah, Tendai. Yeah.
Okay.
And so after a few years of that, he came back, and he was a Scientologist, but then he kind of fell out of grace with Scientology because he had this epiphany that he wanted to start a new religion that was African, traditional African at the core, and then but included elements of Buddhism and Hermeticism and a Masonic structure, and then he started delving into Norse religion. And so it was like a very unique thing. So the Church of Scientology told him to stop, and he said no. And they said stop or leave, and he said bye. And then they told his wife, you have to divorce your husband or get him to stop, you know, or we'll kick you out. And by the way, congratulations, you're Africa's first OT5.
Wow.
So what do you say? Are you going to divorce him? So she divorced him. It sucked, you know. And then later she was like, I shouldn't have done that, but he was saying, well, you did it. So so anyway, that's my buddy Kay down in South Africa, giving him a big plug right now. But I forgot why. Because it's the Black Sun. So from a Buddhist perspective, who's aware of the veils of negative existence, he chose the African word ku to represent the darkness of the nothingness beyond the light. And I was like, cool, I like it.
That's trippy.
So so I went down there and hung out with them for 10 days, which was nice because he had a nephew that at one time, he showed this nephew a picture of me wearing my nemes, and he said, you see how these white people come and they make us into Christians, and they make us into this and that, and tell us to reject our spiritual roots, and then what do? They embrace African religion. And so this nephew was like, I hate him, you know, like looking at the picture of me, like, I want to kill that man. And so then I flew down there and participated with great respect in their rituals, and knelt before the Voodoo god of the representing the ancestors, and they were all very impressed because there was one ritual where you're supposed to name all of the ancestors you know the names of. They didn't know what they were getting into. John, son of Dan, son of John, son of, you know, like all the way back 12 generations. And how many names is that? So my turn took a long time because I had to name every ancestor's name I knew. And how they were connected to me. And then that night, then I went to sleep and had like a vivid nightmare in which I saw my grandmother in my old house where my temple was, and she was walking, she was very concerned and walking counterclockwise. And I woke up and I was like, what have I done to my grandmother? Like I said, she was the one who said, put Jesus in your heart. And there I am in Africa participating in voodoo rituals. So something was going on in here, no doubt, you know.
Right. Well, that's a trip.
But yeah, at the end, that kid, that same nephew, he gave me a big hug and thanked me for coming down and showing him that this African religion is sacred, yes, and should be for everyone and not limited to Africans, and certainly not limited to Europeans, but the whole world can share in this. And he sees that now. And then he gave me a book that it was Sarah and Cleopatra, like, or Mark Anthony, I forget. And I was like, this is very like too thoughtful, you know, like that's really interesting. And so that was my time. That was my 10 days in Africa. That was a trip.
Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And so you kind of transition out of that now. Do you consider yourself part of like any school of thought, like Buddhism or like some Hindu?
Well, that's a good question.
Or do you just see yourself more syncretic or more?
I'm very fond of Sri Ramakrishna's perspective of, you know, like I have this.
It froze up.
And the Buddha and Taj Mahal, just basically all, you know, not I wouldn't say all religions, but like the ones I connect with, you know, which is basically aesthetically and creatively, I love Vajrayana Buddhism. But as far as my personal philosophy and path is much closer to a Theravada or Zen, which are two totally different things, I know. Sure. But Zen I see as kind of like a movement back to the Theravada after the Vajrayana and the Mahayana. It was like a very hyper-organized Theravada type of thinking, but from the perspective of the lessons from history, it was 1800 years after Theravada, so that it really got going. I mean, in China, Chan was around a few hundred years before that, but yeah. So I'm very partial to Dogen, the one who brought Zen into Japan. I like the Shobogenzo. I read it over and over. I mean, I guess if you go by what I read, my dad was the first. That's the thing, is he wrote a scripture called Transformations. He wrote his own scripture. It's like it's his own chapter in the Bible. It's even got chapters and verses. Wow. And so when he died, and I felt like I had lost my teacher, I had this. Well, first I joined the Golden Dawn, and then after a year in the Golden Dawn, I found out my dad had written a book. Wow. And this was a lot like someone throwing a lifesaver, you know, and because it helped me stay afloat, kind of. While it made me look at the groupthink. The word egregore in Golden Dawn is groupthink. That's how they defined it in 1880, whatever. But then I was like, well, I have my perspective though, which is largely based on my dad's, and it's kind of over here and separate, and it's a little bit Buddhist and kind of a little bit Hindu. And so I was that, but I think the group appreciated me as bringing an ornament, bringing a little bit of spice and an unusual flavor to the Golden Dawn groupthink, in that I always had that Eastern perspective. And then we would always recite Romans 12, where not all members of the body have the same function. So, you know, BT's function is, that's me, you know, Edward's function is to be a little bit humorous and do things on the internet and be Buddhist, I guess, you know. So
Right.
that was sort of where my pigeonhole after a while. I ended up doing a lot of charity, partly because, I mean, you know, it was from the heart. Actually, there's kind of an interesting history there, and I've never really explained it.
Mhm.
It's sort of one of those things that was like secret third order stuff, you know. So
Yeah, right.
even all these years later, it's like hard for me to really like, well, how much of this should I talk about? How much is appropriate to talk about? Basically, okay, I'll do the short version, and I'm sorry again that I'm talking so much. I feel like I'm, but okay, so 9/11 hit, and I had been in the second order by then for about 9 months, and I was still very starry-eyed and young, and thought, oh, you know, oh, I'm part of the incarnation of Jesus in the world today. And then so 9/11 happened, and then the leader, you know, I'm calling him Bob Copperfield in my book I'm writing, so I'll just call him that here. Okay. I called him Voldemort, but a few people rightfully complained that gives him too much credit. So Bob Copperfield is much better because his name was Bob and he was a stage magician, among other things. Okay. It wasn't a David Copperfield, more of a, where's my finger? Anyway, right. So he called everybody and said, okay, mandatory speakerphone call, or not speaker, mandatory conference call. So we all called in, and he was very seriously talking about how the third order is very upset with us because it's our fault that this happened. And what? And he's like, it's my fault, it's your fault, it's this order's fault. Wow. If we had done what we were supposed to do 3 years ago, this wouldn't have happened. And wow. But we can do something now to make up for that, and to try to, you know, come back into good graces with the Lord or whatever. You know, yeah. It was such a mind fuck, you know. I mean, even though half, you know, any rational part of the brain is like, well, this is stupid, and the other part of the brain is, but it's also the cult that we, you know, joined, and they tied us to a cross and
so it's like you're invested in this thing already.
Yeah. It's like I have to go along with this or say goodbye to all my friends, you know, like, or just, and not to mention like lose any, like, according to the world thinks that I am a guy who didn't go to college and is unemployed and, you know, just sort of lives off of his sister, and, you know, but I know in reality that I am the hierophant for this vernal term of the, you know, whatever dumb shit, you know what I mean? It's like all this, everybody in the D&D club, you know, like taking it way too seriously, you know, like forgetting who they really are and thinking they're this little plastic character. And so kind of in the spirit of going along with that, we all very seriously started going to all these mandatory meetings and driving across the country and flying across the ocean and meeting to bless these little talismans. Mm-hmm. And then the idea was that the third order had gave us strict instructions, you know, to go bury these talismans in Jerusalem, and then that would solve world peace. And so, you know, everybody got their wallets out, you know, and like, okay, we've got to pay for how many people to go to Jerusalem and do this. Mm-hmm. And so long story short, we did it. And it's like, I feel so weird talking about it because like in the midst of how weird and creepy it all is, there was like 20 of us like dancing and singing and like having these like sort of like emotional orgiastic kind of experiences all around this idea that we were chosen by God to save the world and end war forever. And so it's like, okay, well, it's like reminiscent of like the 1800s, you know, the apocalypse cults, except that we were Golden Dawn. And so it was really a new kind of phenomenon. Right. So world peace didn't end. I mean, well, you know, world peace didn't happen. So we asked the third order, well, why didn't world peace happen? And they said, because of class division. What we need to do is we need to go to India. And because Mother Teresa started in Calcutta, so we'll bury talismans in Calcutta, and then that will solve world hunger. And then that will end the class animosity that results in war, and then world peace. And so, you know, it's like, all right, I like India, you know, and so yeah, we were focused on that, and we had 72 little pieces of metal, people flying across the country and driving up, and all meeting to bless the 72 pieces of metal, and then 3 people came to Calcutta and buried them. Wow. And then we started seeing articles in the news and about that India was getting into this tech boom, that suddenly people were going to school and learning tech and then flying and getting jobs in US and Canada and UK. And then they started manning all the telephones for everybody. Now it's of course been a cliche for a long time, but this was like 2004, 2005. And the middle class was rising and all this. And so we were fully taking credit for all of this. Like, see,
right, of
course. That's what we did. But we had added Ganesh as a deity in our Golden Dawn pantheon. So it was Isis, Osiris, Set, Horus, and all these, and then Ganesh also, and Jesus, because it was all very Catholic. So what? And so I became a Catholic and started singing in a choir, and then but defending the leftist Catholics who liked someone did a Ganesh invocation in a Catholic church, and so the conservative Catholics in the choir were preaching to the choir literally about how that was evil, a bad thing. So then there was a moment of silence, and I'm like, this is God telling me that now I need to speak up for the people who made the decision to allow Ganesh to be invoked in the Catholic Church. And then the other guy at the end of it, he leaned over to me and he's like, I also like Ganesh too. But he didn't want anybody to know. He didn't want anybody to know, And,
right. Well, that's funny.
So it was involved. It was complex and layers to it. But a lot of that led to my being here. But part of that was in order to maintain after the talismans were buried in India, in order for them to continue to grow, one of us had to work with the Mother Teresa nuns once a month and go feed homeless people in Skid Row, Los Angeles. So that became my job, and that was my job for 10 years. And a lot of that was, it took the pressure off me, because when the head of the order, Bob Copperfield, was taking inventory, who's pulling his weight around here? Who's not? Who's freeloading? Who needs a job? Who needs me to tell them to go? I don't know, threaten some ex-adept or something. I was always like, hey, well, I've got charities, so
right.
So it was sort of my excuse to be, but it was so dumb. I mean, I don't know, because it was also just, how every corrupt organization wants to have some kind of charity thing going on the side, so that they can say, oh, look, so I was very much that, welcome to the order. For those of you who think that there shouldn't be people starving on the streets, talk to BT about going to feed them with the Mother Teresa nuts. Like, just straight up stupid propaganda, but it was my life. I was walking the propaganda. So, but it was an interesting experience, and I did meet a lot of interesting characters who were homeless in Skid Row, and the nuns were interesting, and individuals that I got to meet and get to know and learn from, so overall, it's like, okay, yeah, the structure of my experience was within a control system. But I mean, on the other hand, what isn't? Zoom and Facebook are a type of, it's just a different type, but it's, I think, preferable to some used car salesman with a messianic complex or something.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting though, like if you consider, like you're talking about your Catholic experience, like from my experience growing up in America, it's like all the religions are so pitted against each other. Like even within Christianity, you have all the different sects and Catholics versus the Protestants and all this shit, right? Yeah. But it's like, from what I've seen, I've never been to India, I've never lived there, but from just like my studies and encountering, it seems India is so much more inclusive, where it's like, for example, like you were talking about like Ramakrishna, it's sort of like the Vedanta, like all religions can fit in easily into their sort of map or schema or their paradigm and stuff like that. And even in India, like, you have different people worshiping different, you have Shivites or whatever, and different devotees to different gods, but they don't see it as like, as far as I know, they don't see it as like this huge like war against each other or anything like.
Most of them don't, though there is a little bit of a, there is a little bit of a, I mean, I have to keep in mind that the government might be watching this. There are nationalists who like basically feel that India should be for everyone except for terrorists, and one thing the terrorists all have in common is their religion, right? So then there's a little bit of a people looking at the people of that religion, but in the same breath you'll see a woman in a full sari, even with the face covered, walking with a woman in a full burqa, laughing,
Right.
talking about gossip in the village, in any village in India. So it's true that it is inclusive, especially much more so than in the US, where, yeah, like you said, it's like always kind of a big deal if a Jewish person has a conversation with a Muslim, or if a Christian has a conversation with an atheist. It's like news at 11,
Right.
but yeah, here it's the diversity is just part of the tapestry, and it simultaneously, people can take their religion very seriously, but not in a way that makes them pitted against someone who has a different religion. And and it's very common for Hindus and Muslims to be married. And it's usually a bit controversial, that people in both families, there's the conservative older folks that get rubbed the wrong way by that. But there's a famous Mughal emperor, Akbar, who one of the things he was famous for was for not only marrying a Hindu like princess, but building a Hindu temple inside of his Islamic capital building for her, to worship Krishna in, because that was her religion. And so people love Akbar, partly because he also got rid of the pilgrimage tax, because the Mughals used to tell the Hindus, oh, you want to do your yearly pilgrimage, you have to pay this tax, and he got rid of that because he found out everybody hated it, and they hated them because of it. So he was the nice emperor, the nice Mughal, but he was the exception. So there's this weird, I noticed just from Facebook, there's like people who tie in this strong resentment against the occupation by anybody, whoever. It's sort of a little bit of like what China has made as their core principles of their established government. It's never again, so there's people who have that feeling of, we don't want any Mughals, we don't want any British, we don't want anyone except for us. And there's like such beautiful things in India that, and the tradition is so, and the Hindu culture specifically is so ancient and rooted, that and on top of that, their 1920s style nationalism, God, I'm going to get myself in trouble, aren't I? It was not allowed to fully express itself until after the British left. And then there went through a socialist period where there was an Italian woman in charge. And I mean, they're the ones that politically I agree with more, but I can understand the sort of gut emotional, the frustration, with the people who like wanted the flag to be an expression of their pride in their own family, their ancestors. And by the way, screw the Mughals and screw the British, and we don't need any tourists, we don't need any Muslims, get them all out of here. And just kind of like the big issue that came up a few years ago was there was a law that was written so that, okay, if you're illegal, we're kicking you out, but if you're here illegally, and you're Hindu or Buddhist or Christian or Jainist, or like the list went on and on and on and on and didn't include Muslim, then you can stay. So they wanted to get rid of all the illegal aliens, except for the ones who were anything but Muslim. And then people were like, so you want to get rid of all the Muslims? No, we're not saying that, but you are, though, so there was some controversy about that, which and by the way, I certainly love the Indian government. I think that they're perfect, and I have no complaints whatsoever. And I'm so grateful to be allowed to live here with my beautiful wife. And please don't deport me. Please don't deport me.
So you currently live in India. You live in India. You're married to a Indian woman. And did you say that you taught yoga or something? Is that? I think you had mentioned that.
Did.
You did?
I haven't taught in India.
Oh, okay.
And if I had, I wouldn't admit it publicly, because of the visa.
Well, do people so like the average Western, when we say yoga, they're thinking about stretching, like hatha yoga, like that kind of stretching. When I think about yoga, I'm always thinking about like the philosophy and the, you know what I mean? Like
there's a weird flip flop that I've noticed happened where in California, Well, I mean, maybe it was just my neighborhood I was hanging out with. But if I talked to like a
Right.
yoga student or a yoga teacher in California, and I'd say, tell me
Right.
about yoga, they say, well, yoga has many layers.
Mhm.
Asana is the third limb of 8 limbs, and
Right.
and Patanjali and this and that,
The Yoga
and they can
Sutra has
explain
many.
it.
Yeah.
Then I came to Delhi, and I,
Uh-huh.
overhear conversations with girls would be like, I need to do yoga. My butt is too, I need to do,
Mhm.
I want my butt to be shaped better, so I'm going to do yoga.
Right.
And like an
Right.
Indian person saying that. So
Mm.
it got corrupted, and then the corrupt version backflowed. Well, then it tried to correct itself, and so then I'm over here
Right.
like, what is going on? But
Mhm.
that's just one silly example. There are very serious schools and very serious yoga practitioners here who, of course, are aware that it's much more than stretching. But I think
Right.
in the West, the West gets too much of a bad rep, partly because of the Instagram phenomenon, which
Mhm.
is in part the fault of all these brands that
Right.
encourage influencers to,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know, to have 1 million followers that are constantly engaged by scantily clad yoga poses in order to sell Lululemon,
Right.
and that's all really fucked up. And that should be something should be done about that. But even the women, the
Yeah.
models in those
Mhm.
pictures, when you talk to them, they're reading Patanjali, and they're
Yeah. Right.
usually
Right. I
taking
mean,
the
it has some
principles
good
to heart.
influence, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I mean that's why
Yeah.
so many of them are vegan, because they read about ahimsa.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I mean, partly, I mean, maybe some of them were vegan already or for other reasons, but for me, I was vegan for 3 years
Mhm.
when I first became a yoga teacher, and it was, I I don't know. I think a lot of what I did, a lot of my motivations for doing a lot of things were out of a sense of insecurity, because my dad taught me a kind of yoga with
Mhm.
breathing and chanting when I was like 5.
Mhm.
And then I said that my dad taught me yoga, but I didn't know about stretching yoga. I didn't know it existed. I was
Oh,
12
okay.
years old, 13 years old, and my friend
Right.
Matt was like, oh, my dad also does, my dad and I do yoga. And I was kind of like, what? You don't even know what you're talking about, man. And then my dad shows up, and he's 300 pounds, and
Right.
so of course Matt laughed until he cried, because I had told him that my dad taught me yoga, and well, this guy, like, he
Yeah.
does yoga, yeah, fucking right. And so I think like that like 12 year old like little thing like planted a seed that inevitably resulted in my becoming a yoga teacher and moving to India, just to like
Wow.
try to prove that I know what yoga is, or something. I mean, like, on some really primal insecure child level,
Oh, that's
and
pretty funny.
similar with Golden Dawn, and with delving into Buddhism and going to Nepal and going to the site where Buddha was born,
Mhm.
and all this kind of stuff. There was one point where I started explaining what I knew about Vajrayana Buddhism, and
Mhm.
then she put on her resume that her Vajrayana Buddha teacher was Edward Reed. And so
Whoa.
then, and that kind of like lit a fire in me that resulted in me buying a one-way ticket to Nepal, because I was
You're
like,
like, I better know my shit.
I can't be anybody's Vajrayana Buddhism teacher. I'm like barely even a student. I've never learned from
You're
a
like, I
human
gotta go get my
about
lung
it.
and my empowerment.
Yeah. Sit in a cave for a month, and oh my
Right.
God.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Uh,
That's pretty funny.
but but I think I think I don't know. I guess I think all this stuff I'm doing, I'm publishing books and making podcasts. I think, just to get meta a little bit, I guess I'm still a little bit wrapped up in that. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't, it's not like I have some like message that I want to get out there, but I
Mhm.
just have a need for my voice to be talking out there. But I
Right,
don't
right,
know.
right.
There was a point where Esoterinerd had an altruistic motive. But
Yeah.
then now I think it's just an excuse to talk to people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, I mean, that's a beautiful thing. If that's you can't really say if that's all it is, but the fact that
Yeah,
you're having interesting conversations, that's value in itself.
that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, and it's
Uh,
good to connect with like-minded people or people that are interested in traveling and weird shit like the stuff we're into. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But I want to talk much less. How did you get started? I mean, I just tell me about what happened. What part of California are you from?
Okay, I grew up partially in Hawaii too. So I grew up like
Okay.
half my life in Hawaii and then
Mm,
half in Northern California and also Sacramento, like Bay Area and also Sacramento. And
okay.
so
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so like kind of like my dad's side, very Christian, very what would you say, like yeah, like conservative Christian. So I grew up with that side when my parents were divorced. So with my dad, I had the whole Catholic Christian on his side of his family.
He was the
My
one in
mom
Hawaii?
was my dad was in California. My mom, we moved to Hawaii for like, I don't know, probably like 12 years or something like that.
Okay.
And then growing up there, my mom was more into Buddhism. She used to go to this Japanese Buddhist church where they would have, like almost like services, but everything's more focused. It's obviously different, right? Because you're studying like the Dhammapada and like breathing and like meditation.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So I got kind of an early exposure to like both of these things, right? And then being in Hawaii too, you had like Ram Dass's group and like all these different sort of very eclectic like Eastern religions and things along these lines, right? And so
not to mention Pele and original stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. Kahunas and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how my background initially. And then on top of that, my great grandfather, who would visit all the time, he was a head honcho Mason in California, like the Grand General Secretary of like the Shriners and the all the like the Scottish Rite and all these groups, right? And so and just growing up, like just going to his house, I would see all these cool esoteric symbols and stuff like that, right? Like I remember one time he gave me this. It was on my birthday or something. He gave me this thing, and it had like the pyramid with the eye, and then all these like cool symbols. I was like, man, what the hell is this?
Cool.
Right? Yeah. So that kind of influenced me as a kid. I was like, what are all these symbols, and what's all this, weird shit?
I've got my dad's Mason thing hanging up here. My dad, he joined, as an adult, but then he was disillusioned because it wasn't the magical place that he imagined it would be. The Masonry, I mean.
Right. And
but he had the Masonic belt buckle and everything.
Right. If anything, it's kind of a cool. It's like a social network or something like that.
Yeah.
With
an interesting history. Symbols are cool and everything. Yeah.
No doubt. So I got into that, and then just growing up doing a lot of acid and stuff like that, meditating a lot and sort of exploring, So I've always been more inclined, I guess, towards Eastern religions until then my grandfather passed away, and I kind of wanted to, explore Masonry and sort of. Then from there you kind of start like digging. Then it's like Rosicrucianism and you're looking into all that kind of stuff. And so I guess my interests are pretty vast. I mean, I don't really consider myself part of anything. I do practice like Vajrayana Buddhism as well, but also I'm still very interested in like Western esoteric stuff, especially a few different things, especially more I'm more interested not really in as much as in like the Golden Dawn and that kind of stuff, but very much in like the works of John Dee and sort of that Elizabethan like magic time, because in my experience it's like that whatever they were doing, it's quite fascinating just reading the accounts and reading the diaries of people like John Dee and stuff like that. But
that's true. Yeah.
Actually, like some of the stuff that they're doing, you can perform it. Actually, shit starts changing, right? It's like instantaneous.
Yeah. How interesting. Yeah. Because the Victorian era, of course. Yeah. I mean, they were all Anglicans, but Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry. So, I mean, what is Anglican back then? I mean, it was a brand new thing. She had a wizard, I mean.
Right, exactly, like an advice. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's certain, figures, I guess you would say, in the Western esoteric tradition that are fascinating to me. So, so I guess, you could say I have like my feet in both worlds, but definitely more immersed in non-dual sort of worldview, because you get into like Hermeticism, there's a lot of emanationist theory, and you can play with numbers and Kabbalah, and it's become sort of like a mental, I feel like to a lot of it can become mental masturbation to a degree. But that's why I would say maybe Buddhist with Hermetic overtones or something. I don't know.
I think when I think about like, for example, Renaissance Italy was going on in Rome, which had the shadows of the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire and all this other stuff. The Golden Dawn was going on in London with the smell of the Thames outside and the horse stomping and all the shouting and extra, read all about it. So what are you going to do? You're going to go into a room and seal the doors, light a lot of incense, and have everybody go, oh, until you can experience something similar to a moment of silence. And so I think that a lot of that is like, I mean, and I kind of used to teach this way, is like, if we don't fill our heads with these graphs and these names and these angels and these spirits, what does our head get filled with? TV and billboards and random people we meet on the street and the coworkers and the happy hour Fridays. And so it's like
happy hour Friday.
It's like it's sort of like fighting fire with fire, like fighting Bernaysian propaganda with Bernaysian propaganda, or with Freud anyway, with fighting symbols and fighting with symbols, where if you take an ascetic path, then you don't need any of that. I mean, then the yogic path is much more appropriate, because what do you have left when it's just you? Well, you have your breathing, you have what position are you sitting in, what, then you get into the nitty gritty of it. But yeah, Golden Dawn and that style, I think, is more custom made for the city dwelling European, or maybe the westernized, because there's a little bit of interest. I mean, I don't know if it's just a fashion thing, but I noticed the sigillium as a shirt in Tokyo when I was there. Yeah,
that's interesting.
And things like the Last Supper, and I mean, of course, Christianity went around and made itself known, so it's not like it's new to anybody, especially in like Korea or But it seems.
What's interesting about Japan, though, it's like, because Christianity spread around the world. I don't know if you know this, but like when Christianity,
but not Japan.
Not Japan.
Did you see the movie Silence?
No, maybe I have not.
Oh, it's so good. Oh,
it's called Silence.
I think it's called Silent. It's Scorsese's most recent movie, and it's sort of a slow burner. I mean, it's not like a big hit, but it's like, this is an excellent movie,
I have to check it out.
It's about the Portuguese, the original Portuguese priests showing up in Japan.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Wow. Well, I'm gonna have to check this out. But yeah, they fucked them up. They're like, we're not.
Big time.
You're not allowed. Yeah, we're not gonna spread this shit here.
Yeah, that was the same day they arrived in Japan. They arrived here where I'm sitting, and they never left. So they just sort of took over and made this the main port. And then they took over pieces of Africa, so they would have convenient places to stop on their way to Goa, and that was the beginning of the colonization of Africa. I mean, maybe that's oversimplified, but
sure,
it seems like that.
Sure. Then, for me, as far as it goes, then coming to Korea, and Korea, basically most of the Buddhism here is Zen, what would be called Zen, because what is Zen? It's really Chan from China, with Sun in Korea, and actually Buddhism came to Japan through Korea as well. So through China, obviously, originally through India, right, and Nepal. So so you're picking up stuff along the way.
Bodhidharma,
Bodhidharma, exactly. So it's cool. I got I get to do temple stays here, and I've got to interview some of the Zen monks and stuff like that. And
that's great.
And there are what's cool about living here in East Asia, there's beautiful temples in the mountains. You can, I can take a bus 2 hours, 3 hours away and be what you would consider a movie, right? It's unbelievable. You're on a mountaintop, kind of like some of the footage I've seen in Bhutan as well. You're on a mountain and just totally remote. You're eating, fresh vegetables and doing vipassana and then chanting the heart sutra at night. What's that?
People go to the temples and they leave candy. So I went up to this mountaintop, and it was just cold, and they let me meditate, alone in the temple for half an hour. Then afterward, we were shivering, and the monk that was overseeing the place at the time, and the two guys that were with me, and I just started pigging out on candy.
Right. I'll take a temple. Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool and in Korea, what's interesting too is growing up in America, where it's all these religions seem to be, it was always this is the right one, this is the right Christian, this is the right sect of Christianity. In Korea, what's interesting, which I guess is probably like India to an extent, besides what you were talking about earlier, here the religions all live, it's mostly Christians and Buddhists basically, but they're very there's not much of a animosity or anything like you see in America. They live side by side. They have Christmas here, but they also do Buddha's birthday, right? They're both national. They're both national holidays, and they're both respected. It's not fuck you, not that kind of thing. So I mean, Korea is a pretty interesting place to live. A lot different than India because it's so modern. Fastest internet in the world. You have tech giants like Samsung and
But is it, I think every Kim is descended from an Indian princess.
Yeah. There's an interesting
yeah.
story behind it. Yeah. One of the
that.
older kings, what was it, took on a Indian princess or something? Wasn't that the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know about that.
Yeah.
That's and most people don't know that. That's a pretty obscure fact, right? And I heard that the Korean delegation, when they go to India, they always pay homage at this like site in India. It's very interesting. Almost Koreans barely even know about that. That's interesting that you know about that. You know,
I think it's the king's name was Kim. I think all the Kims know. It's because
right.
it's like, you know, something in there.
There's also, you know, what's weird too. A lot of the Hindi words in Korea has a lot of similar. You can go on YouTube. This is weird. It's kind of freaky. Go on YouTube and put like Hindi. I think it's Hindi and Korean, and then there's like a bunch of words that are the same. It's a trip. Like, yeah, it's very.
They invented. Like, there was Korean was put together by, was it one guy or like a group of people? Maybe.
I mean, I'm sure it's had a lot of influence and stuff like that from different, you know, through India, through China, through Mongolian and things like this, right? But as far as the alphabet, though, the alphabet was put together by the king, actually, a king.
Right.
So yeah, the actual.
There was a guy named Bodhisena who came from South India, who he was in China and then he ended up in Japan, and he had a big influence there, especially on their alphabet, the one with the fewer characters, the one that doesn't look just like Chinese.
Like hiragana and stuff like
that. But one of those was based on Sanskrit, apparently. And so, yeah, and I've noticed like ik do tin char ichi ni san chi. It's just like a little bit of, and I mean, getting back into, you know, the Proto-Indo-European, it's just fascinating. Like there's a word here, we, that's with, that's the same as with, and Raja, royal, and yoga, union. And it's just so many words that are just so similar to like the older English words and some German words and Latin words even. And even I think their word for 100 is, but then, I mean, there was also, I think people imagine, like one thing I always point out is that the Muslim based, you know, majority countries back then, that was before Muhammad. So that wasn't a thing, you know, like, so if there was a rough tribe or something, you know, in an area you might have to deal with along the Silk Road. But other than that, people just sort of traded and talked and, you know, gave each other stuff. And so you had, I mean, like, obviously there was like, when you go far enough back, there was the Persian period, then Alexander, and so then the guys that were with Alexander, they took over the northwest of present day India. So there was like a period of, I forget how many years, 30 years, 40 years, where there was a Greco-Indian kingdom that was Buddhist. And then they were,
that's very fascinating.
Like pre-Christian. So people like, but people get shocked by the idea of, you know, like was it Carlos Castaneda's Jesus in India? The idea that Jesus spent any time in India, people go, well, that's absurd. Well, it's like, look at a map. He was here, India was here. Like the Romans were regularly going in boats back and forth. You know, it wasn't like Stone Age. It was, you know, like there was like some number, like 200 boats per year coming from down the Red Sea, from Egypt down into India at that time. There was a Jewish neighborhood in Kerala in Thomas's day. So like there was a place for him to go. When they say Thomas came to India, and people say that's absurd. That couldn't have been. No, he came to the Jewish neighborhood and that's where he established his church. That's where his church still is. That's where they hail all the way back to him. In fact, when the Portuguese came, they didn't recognize it because they didn't know the language. So among the Hindu temples they were burning down, they burnt down Christian temples, Christian churches too. Because they couldn't read the old Dravidian language where it said Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Oh, that's a trip.
Yeah, it's really trippy.
Yeah, history.
So
there's just so much.
I always have to point that out.
And language, and you know, the world is a lot more connected than people think. You know, like. And
in India, as far as Christianity, like you know, Western liberal, reactionary, progressive atheist types. I say that with love. I'm not saying that from like some other side. I'm with you. I'm with y'all. You know, the leftist atheists. No, I think they're They're great. They're much better than the right-wing Christians, I'd say, personally, in my opinion.
Right.
But they have a little bit of an extreme view where they would look at Goa and see just a sad example of Western colonialism. But the thing is, there's a rich and ancient beauty here that is Catholic, yeah, and it is Portuguese influenced, and it's also Indian, and it's the result of bloodshed like everywhere else in the world. I mean, go to Normandy, you know, like in France, and it's like, well, you want to sit there and cry about the French that the Normans came and killed when they established this, or are you going to just look at the beautiful wall? You know, like there's beautiful walls here. There's a fort and you know, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, like what I was saying is Christianity didn't necessarily always spread by the sword, in the sense of you know, like Spanish conquistadors with their priest next to them. It that did happen here, but there was also an earlier period where one of the 12 disciples came here specifically. It was his job to come here. So India's history with religion and with Christianity specifically is much older than I don't know. That's just something I wanted to say, just in case anybody's listening.
It's interesting just how much religion, not only how many religions have sort of blossomed in India, but then how even the Western religions, we're thinking like Christianity or Islam, like they have a huge presence.
They're not even Western. They had it in Rome, and Rome was an empire, so thus Catholicism, but that wasn't necessarily Christianity. Like you know, it's like just like the swastika. You know, Hitler took the swastika from someone else. You know, okay, they have one, I guess, in Old Norse, but he took it from me.
It's a Buddhist symbol,
and Hindu too.
And Hindu, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
very interesting.
And gave it a bad name, and you know,
right. It is weird to see like such a peaceful symbol just totally into the.
It's actually very nice here, because you know, you see it around, and I have a Lakshmi shrine right over there with a swastika, and you know, like
it's actually everywhere here as well, just because of the Buddhism.
Oh yeah,
you see it
that's
everywhere.
true. Yeah,
but it's like that's why I remember when I first got here, I was like, wait a minute, like I'm staring at the I think that's what everybody, like when they first start seeing those symbols in Korea, you know, like swastika. Symbols. Like,
and in India they have the yantra where you'll see like you'll see a Jewish star with a swastika with you know, and it's because those are two sacred symbols that are related to each other in a specific way here, and it's like lucky. You know, it's like nothing weird.
Yeah, that's a trip.
It's neither Jewish nor German, you know.
Right, exactly. Things get twisted later, you know. It's kind of funny, like, hey, they took that from us, man. Hey, don't, you know, like, what are you doing with that? Hey, man, they appropriated our symbol. Like, that's not what it's supposed to mean, you know. That's pretty crazy.
That is one other weird thing, is if you go to any bookseller in Delhi, someone will be sitting there with a pile of books, and if they have more than 20 books, one of them will be Mein Kampf. That's a little odd.
Oh, that is interesting. Weird, huh?
Yeah, I think because they just had a different view of everything that happened in World War II. I mean, like, I mean, I guess it's probably about as, I mean, it's not even as edgy as like a liberal Westerner having a picture of Mao. Maybe Che. It's like probably on the same level as Che, you know, for them. It's like, if you get down and talk to somebody, they're like, oh yeah, you know, I've read Mein Kampf. I really like Hitler's political philosophy. That's why you know, it's similar to the Hindu nationalists. And it's like, yeah, but that's why it's not good though. You know, like,
missing some other parts of the story here. That's pretty funny.
I sat down with a guy, he was showing me his sketches. He's like, I'm an artist too. I draw, you know, and it's like, but why are they all Hitler? He's like, I just really like his political philosophy. I'm like, this Indian guy in Pune. It's like, okay. Yeah, I knew him because we were both at the same Ayurvedic doctor. He was getting an enema. I watched him get an enema, and then I looked at his drawings of Hitler. It was interesting. It's really an interesting place.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I'm sure because of the COVID situation, you've been kind of stuck where you're at. But have you got a chance to travel around all the different, like a lot of different parts of India, or you've been?
Well, not all of them, but sorry about the dogs, by the way.
Oh, that's okay.
I shifted here in 2018. And what ended up happening was my original plan was I was going to continue my Buddhist pilgrimage. So
Yeah.
there was Lumini in India, in Nepal, and then
Uh-huh.
I had 3 places to visit in India. So I came to India and I got to Delhi and I was like, okay, I'm in Delhi.
Yeah.
First, I'll go to Bodh Gaya or Sarnath.
Uh-huh.
And but while I'm here, I'm going to write to my Facebook friend and see if she wants to have coffee. There she
Mhm.
is. Hello. She just came back from,
Mm.
yeah, we're married now, so you can kind of see where the story's going.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we had coffee, and then after a couple weeks, I said, okay, I'm going to continue traveling. You
Mhm.
know, so it was nice spending these 2 weeks with you here in Delhi, but I
Mhm.
came here to see India, so I'm going to see India. She was working 6 days a week, so
Mm.
she couldn't travel much. And so I left, and I left for 2 weeks. I went to Varanasi, I went to Sarnath, I went to Pune, and I came back to Delhi. I said, I'm not going anywhere without you. That was torture. So,
Oh, wow.
you know, it was like we really came together, you know,
Wow. Wow. Wow.
in the beginning. And I said, I can't, you know, and so she started taking days off work so that we could travel together. But
Oh.
we'd go for 3 days here, 3 days there.
Mhm.
So we went to Rishikesh that way. We went to Dharamshala that way.
Mhm.
And you know, a couple of other places. We went down to Mysore
Mhm.
eventually, and then after I worked some things out, so she didn't have to work there anymore. And so so I said, hey, because her boss was being kind of a
Mhm.
controlling psycho, and so
Right.
I was like, hey, why don't you just not go to work, you know?
Right.
And so she didn't, and then so then we were able to travel more. So we went down to Mysore and took yoga training. We went to Thailand, and then we were planning to keep going, and then COVID hit. So
Right.
we had a bit of traveling. She still hasn't been to the States,
Okay.
but once everything kind of goes back to normal, then we'll start taking steps to, you know, nothing too dramatic. Just try to get her a tourist visa so we can go, and or maybe it's simple enough to do a spousal visa. But if we were going to do the 3 year, I think we'd have to stay in the US for 3 years if she wanted to go for citizenship. Think about
Okay.
that's how that works.
Yeah.
But you know, if we do that, that'll be something for the future. But
Right. Right.
anyway,
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if
Well,
people are interested in these
that's an interesting story.
things.
Started as like a Buddhist pilgrimage and ended up in
Yeah,
India getting
yeah.
married.
I didn't want to go back. I wanted to come here and somehow find a way to stay forever. And in
Mhm.
my mind, I was thinking I would either marry the pretty girl on Facebook, or become a monk. And luckily, it turned out to be the first one.
Right, right, right. Yes, sounds better to me
Yeah,
personally. Yeah, you can be a householder, not living in the
exactly.
mountains. Yeah,
Householder yogi. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go. Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
yeah.
Um, I guess with God, it must have been interesting living there during COVID and everything because it wasn't it
Mm,
wreaking havoc. I remember I was actually in a quarantine, so I had the news on, which I don't really watch the news
yeah.
that much, but
Mm,
I just remember watching the news while I was in quarantine one time, and it was like 500,000 cases a day. The next day was like
oh,
600,000 cases a day.
yeah,
Like it got
yeah.
real
We were
bad for a
late.
while, right?
We were late
Uh-huh.
bloomers. There was a time when it was the
Right,
US, you know, half of everybody has COVID. And then India, what
right.
about India? Oh, we have 5 cases.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Right,
then the whole world kind of looked at each other. We're like, I think they're lying about their numbers. You know, like,
right.
but then, yeah, when it hit here, it hit hard. And, you
Right.
know, then but the numbers, the growth numbers are down. Like the number of new cases every day are down
Mhm.
from where they were,
Right
which
now, yeah.
sounds like, yeah, like that's still not great. That means, of course, we have thousands of new cases every day, but
Right,
fewer thousands of new cases every day than it
right,
was when everybody was panicking at that time.
right,
And
right, right. I heard some of
yeah.
those places that got hit super hard. It would make sense that they would have a degree of herd immunity because it was just like wiping through certain region like areas, right?
Mm,
Like if
mm,
they're having, think about that, if you're having 500,000 cases a day at one time, and
mm,
that's not even counting all the people that were asymptomatic and stuff, like it's very feasible
right.
that millions of people in certain regions got it. And then they
And
just, yeah,
when everything shut down, there were a lot of people living in the major cities that weren't from there, that
right.
didn't, like live there, or if they did, they were paying rent and working to pay that rent. And so they all had to go back, and a lot of them went by foot because they couldn't even go by train or by bus. They walked, you know, and so it ended up spreading that way, you know, from the city to the villages, and then back when when they reopened, everybody migrated back to the cities and brought it back from the villages, and so it was just like not very well thought out.
Wow.
I think at one point they were operating the trains to help people to get where they needed to go, but yeah, a lot of migrant workers. Here, migrant worker just means from, you know, a state over there coming to a major city to work. You know?
Okay. Coming from like the countryside to a bigger city, more.
It's not really something that happens in US. You don't really have Alabama people going to work in California. I mean, you do, but it's more of a permanent thing. It's like, I am going to upgrade my life situation, go to college, not be from Alabama anymore.
Go to a big city or something. Yeah. Right. Oh, interesting. So they call them migrant workers.
We got out in time. California got too expensive. I mean, it was
yeah. Honestly, I would not want to live there now. You know, not now. Just with like we're talking like just the oh my god, just the price of everything, and just the climate, like political climate, and the overall vibe. It's weird because
plus the fires every year.
Oh, the fires everywhere. Yeah, exactly. One thing I noticed, I mean, I don't know, I guess the last time you were there was 3 or 4 years ago, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I was 2018.
Oh, 2018. Okay. I don't know what I get last time I was the last couple of times. It's like you feel like people are on edge and they're very. It's like there's tension in the air and it's thick.
Yeah. When was the last time you were there?
That was right before COVID, I think, or right when it started.
Oh, okay.
Right when it started, but it wasn't really a thing.
Yeah,
it was like
that
early
was right in the
early
thick
2020.
Of thing.
Yeah.
Oh man, things were so polarized. I mean, now they're polarized, but they're polarized with memes. But back then, there were people marching in the streets. Like,
It just feels
and then
like
COVID hit, and they didn't care. They kept marching in the streets. You know, everybody stay home. Well, we're gonna overthrow the government instead. You know, like, what are you doing, Jesus?
Yeah. It just feels like a lot of civil unrest and just very polarized and. I mean,
we were having some riots and protests here about a variety of, you know, several different issues. But then when the lockdown happened, everybody went home. It was like, oh, okay, no more riots for today. We gotta deal with priorities.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. And they vaccinated a lot there too. There are a lot of vaccines.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 Indian vaccines, and then the Russian one is available, and to a limited degree, the American, like you can get Pfizer if you're in a major city. But then the thing that comes up there is sometimes they run out of Pfizer, so you get your first shot, and you go back to get your second shot, and
it's a different one.
Actually, we don't have any. You know, like
right. They give you whatever they have, basically.
Right. So we're actually like staying pretty much quarantined here and holding out for the Pfizer, but it hasn't gotten down here to Goa yet. But it's like, okay, well, this has an 81% chance. This has a 72% chance. That one has a 98% chance, but it's expensive. You know, like, come on.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. One thing, I was checking out your stuff. One character that I'm interested, I was talking about, I'm very fascinated with John D on the Western side.
Yeah.
One character I've been getting very interested in these days is, he's like huge in Bhutan. His name is Drungpa Kunli. And he's the guy, I think that you did an interview with a monk, and he was sort of like the, I think they call him like the father of Bhutan or something like that.
Oh, the great unifier.
Is he the guy with all the phallic? I'm talking about the guy with the phallic symbols everywhere.
Oh, that guy, the divine madman.
They call him the madman. Yeah. The book actually just came out called like The Mad Yogi. There's a new book out that just dropped like a month ago on him. There's another one called The Divine Madman. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's some crossover like with present day problematic behavior. Like, if you imagine like Padmasambhava, the stories about him, if he was going on today, then people would probably accuse him of, being inappropriate,
Right.
And same with the divine madman. So it's a tough. I mean, before all the scandals, I don't know if you've been following in Shimbalaya, the American, sort of the American, there was Lama, oh, what's his name? The one that came over and hung out with Alan Watts and drank scotch and smoked cigarettes. Lama, my mind is blank. The guy who founded
maybe
Shimbalaya.
Chogyam Trungpa, maybe?
Yeah.
Chogyam
So,
Trungpa,
so he, you know, obviously, I mean, he had his issues, and then Shimbalaya was founded, and the head, that I think it was his son or whoever took over after him, you know, it ended up he was doing a lot of bad things. And, you know, putting people in situations where they felt like they had to go along with, you know, what he was asking for it. But then built into Vajrayana is, hey, if you want to get enlightenment, then you take an oath to your guru to do everything he says. And if you don't like it, then it's your fault, and don't tell anyone because you're naughty. And that's like Vajrayana. And I mean, that's like some part of like the central core tenets of old Vajrayana. So, so that, of course, trying to mix that with the modern world is going to be problems, you know. So I don't know, but I am a fan. I think today I'm less of a fan of the Divine Madman than I was a few years ago, because of considering all of these things.
Right. The ripple effect.
I like his personality, and he reminds me of people that I knew in this life that were funny and kind of like a little dirty, but not too much, but enlightened, kind of, you know, like, so it's like he's like the enlightened pervert, and they don't mind if they like
that's a good way
they go, oh, you know, him, you know, like they don't take it as an insult. He's like, yeah, that's exactly what he was.
No, but his reputation, as far as in Bhutan, it's like it's still very good, isn't it? Don't they like look up to him, or do they see him through that like sort of a sexual predator lens, or no?
They don't see it that way in Bhutan. Right. As far as I know, it's when it comes, it kind of like comes in contact with the, you know, the sort of predatory guru ridden West that dresses up as East, you know, the orientalized, you know, the orientalization of the white cult leader in the you know, saying I'm a Vajrayana teacher, and this is what the gurus do, so this is what I'm going to do, and if you don't like it, blah blah blah. Then it's like it's like particularly dark when it gets into like those areas. And but I mean, but he himself, I mean, from what I understand, I like his mantra, you know, his mantra. He was famous for one of the things he's famous for was someone came to, that I forget his name. I forgive me, all of Bhutan, I'm going to call him the divine. Someone went to him and said, how can I attain enlightenment in one lifetime? And he said, I'll give you a mantra, and if you stick to it, you will attain enlightenment within this lifetime. And he said, great, what is it? And it's in Bhutani. It's like common vernacular, not like a special, you know, but the words are, if I recall correctly, I take refuge in an old man's chastened penis, withered at the root, something like that. I take refuge in an old woman's flaccid vagina, impenetrable, sponge-like. And then I take refuge in the young tiger's, you know, erect penis, you know, indifferent to death. I take refuge in the quivering orgasms of the young maiden's lotus. And so that was his mantra that he was supposed to say over and over. And then so everybody thought he was like a pervert. His family was ashamed of him. They kept him in a room where nobody could hear him chanting, and they wouldn't take him to the public things. And then one day they heard some kind of sound, and they went to his room, and it was empty, and there was a rainbow, and they looked out the window and saw that he was floating away to nirvana, and he was turning around and saying, see you prudes, I'm going to nirvana, you stay here with your hang-ups. And so that's his version of Vajrayana Buddhism. It's like concentrated the naughty parts of Vajrayana Buddhism, like what Westerners think of as Tantra when they hear the word Tantra. That's what it is all about. So he put the focus, and then supposedly if you wanted to see him, that you had to bring wine and a beautiful woman, otherwise he wouldn't see you.
A bottle of wine and a beautiful woman.
Yeah,
that was the,
both. So his temple is like filled with wine bottles from all the people that came to see him. over the
Wow. And
years.
you did you go to that temple? Did you get a chance?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a trip, man. Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty
But
cool.
yeah, his whole thing was, so they paint the penis on every building. There's like the four, like the white something rather, the lion, the mountain lion, the
Mhm.
tiger, the dragon, I think, and then some kind of bird, or the Garuda,
Mhm.
the king of the birds, and then the penis, and that's
Right.
painted on like most homes, businesses, buildings of any kind, temples, and so on and so forth, all over Bhutan.
Wow,
But
that's
that's very unique to Bhutan. I think even before the Chinese occupation, you wouldn't have found that in Tibet. So
mm,
that was something definitely unique to that region. For better or worse, or it's definitely interesting. I mean, it's the only place where you see, like, I mean, like with veins and everything, like not even like an abstract thing. Here in
right.
India, there's the Shiva Lingam, which
Right.
you go and pour milk on, and the old lady's putting milk on, and then you can go hee hee. But like in Bhutan, they're like,
Like
it's
a full
veiny,
out.
detailed, like, on
Right.
the house, and then the young woman underneath, like being, it's
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
And but everybody giggles about it. That's the thing, is they know it's funny. It's like, it's supposed to like make you not take yourself seriously, or like it's
right.
supposed to. But I think people can, it's such an abstract thing to have painted on the side of a wall that a person could kind of go anywhere with it, I guess, and say, well, because my erection is sacred, that's why you must worship it. Or they can,
Right.
like, think it's funny and giggle,
Right.
so I think
Yeah,
maybe
very
some
interesting.
people do one, some people do the other,
Right. Well, it's unfortunate. I mean, I did pick up through ebook that Divine Madman. I haven't read it yet, but I've been just kind of
Mm.
skimming through it. But yeah, if you look at it, it's like, what kind of effect did he have? It sounds very interesting. It sounds almost like lighthearted and fun, but then there's
Yeah.
also the darker side of, like you were saying, like, you know, forcing people to follow your sexual will and things along these
Yeah.
lines, right? There's the disturbing
Yeah.
side and the the more
Well,
lighthearted.
and there's also texts, and not from Bhutan, but from Tibet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing about this secondhand, by the way. So I'm quoting, I think, Matthew Remsky, who's one of the on the Conspirituality podcast. He talked about this. So
Oh.
this isn't direct knowledge. This is my repeating of what he said, is
Mm-hmm.
that there's particular scriptures where it explains how to convince young women, with honey, like to get them with honey, to put it on their lips, to like get them into kissing, and to
Mm-hmm.
start talking to them about this and that, to get them to play the role of
Mm-hmm.
the one who devours herself,
Mm-hmm.
to like train the young women, to so that by the time they're 16 they can. And it's like, oh shit, okay, so some of the Maoist propaganda was true, it turns out. Like, because
Wow.
they had those paintings of the monks with all the women with their breasts hanging out, and they were living in luxury, as like that was, but they all looked Chinese, but that was they were showing people, this is why we need to take over Tibet, is because these are the people in charge in Tibet. And it's like, as an American that likes John Travolta or whatever, or which one was it, Richard Gere,
Mm-hmm.
like, that likes the Dalai Lama, I go, well, this is offensive. But then I start to hear stuff like that, and it's like, oh, they didn't just make it up. There was like a kernel of truth in it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like any of that stuff is based on something. There's a grudge somewhere. There's an injustice somewhere, but then it gets blown out of proportion and made as an excuse for genocide or something.
Yeah.
Like in the case
Right.
of both Hitler and Mao,
Right.
and their grudges. You guys have too much money, in my country, so we're going to kill all of you and take your money back. Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
fucked. And then you do sexual things with young women
Mm-hmm.
and in the name of religion, that's fucked. So we're going to take over your whole country and kill everybody. That's also fucked. It's also fucked.
Right. Well, I
Both
mean,
fucked.
it's a sad part of the past. I mean, well, now too, obviously with power, you have Hollywood and the Me Too,
Yeah.
and then you have. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just not religion, right? You have religion, you have it in
It's
pop
the thing. Yeah.
culture.
It's the
It's
human
power when people have
element.
power. Look at
Yeah.
China. The emperor had like thousands of concubines and stuff, and you look at it right
Yeah.
now. I mean, North Korea, right across the border, literally a
Right.
2 hour drive away, Kim has a sexual slave army. Of
Oh
he
God.
picks them out in high school. I mean, it's not
Mm.
like it's only happening. It's happening now too.
Yeah. It's
Unfortunately,
not just in the
it's
past.
not just in the past. That's what I'm trying to say. I think
Yeah.
it's more of a where there's
And he has
power
nuclear
and
weapons.
corruption, and he has nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
bad combination. If he didn't have that, I'm sure he wouldn't be there anymore. I mean, by now the Americans would have gone in and screwed everything up.
Right.
No,
Right.
but
Well, it's
I think
funny, like
South
you
Korea
talked
is
about.
America's
Mhm.
one success story is South Korea, though.
Yeah, really. It's just weird living here and then just the contrast between the two countries, right? Like
Oh my
you just look at
God,
like
yeah.
they at nighttime they show like Korea is just this huge, any Korean street you go outside, it's like Las Vegas because there's lights everywhere and it's shiny. It's like Japan, basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Everything's shiny
Mm,
and bright, and then you look at North Korea and it's just like nothing, desolate. There's like
mm.
only lights in Pyongyang in that one street where they live, basically.
Yeah, where the tourists go, where the
Yeah,
bus route, where the cardboard cutouts of smiling
right.
people. Yeah.
Right. It's just weird that there's a character like there's this Kim guy just sitting over there, right? And apparently, what he does,
And he's the third one.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
without irony, to say in the name of workers' right and then the name of power to the people,
Right,
I am
right,
going to take over the government. And it
right.
says here that I should do that in order to give it over to you guys. But instead of that, I'm going to
Mhm.
establish a dynasty and we're going to
Right,
go
right.
backwards.
Well, they do, and they also do use like the appeal to religion too, right? Like he's like a cult
Mm,
figure. They worship him basically,
yeah.
like he's from the gods,
Yeah.
basically, like a
They get
god
rid of the
almost.
other religions because they
Yeah.
compete with that religion.
Right,
Yeah.
with our belief, and
Which wasn't
apparently he
Marx's
flies in.
reasoning, but
What's funny is he hates America and everything. Like
mm,
there's no
mm.
animosity towards America, but apparently he flies in McDonald's in from Beijing because they can't have McDonald's in North Korea. So he'll get Big Mac meals delivered from China. He'll apparently his favorite thing to watch is the NBA, which is like the most American thing.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like he likes
yeah.
drinking American alcohol, watching American TV, and eating
Ah.
American McDonald's.
Which there was that guy, the guy with the hair in the NBA that went and hung out with his dad,
Oh,
Dennis Rodman.
Rodman, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Rodman.
Oh. And then they made the interview basically based on him, based on that.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. The movie, The Interview. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, just interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, the world's an
yeah.
interesting place. I always,
Oh, it
too,
sure
it's
is.
fun talking to people who travel a lot and stuff. It's like it really
Yeah,
just changes you so much, just going to different countries
yeah,
and seeing how people
yeah.
think and people live, and there's different ways of living, different philosophies. I feel like that's like one of the most important things. I think you got to get out there, you got to travel.
I think so. Yeah.
Really,
You know
yeah.
that? Do you know the band Gogo Bordello?
What's up?
Gogo Bordello.
Ah, not sure.
There's a song I recommend listening to Wanderlust King by Gogo Bordello. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
music video, and it's like when I first started traveling, it
Mhm.
was like my anthem, and I would
Okay.
show it to other people who were also traveling, and it would become their anthem. It was like such
I
a very go,
okay.
like
Pumps you
talking
up. Or,
about. Yeah, it starts off, he's saying that there was a time when you weren't considered a man unless you had, gone to the other side of the hills, crossed the seven seas. And, but now people stay like scarecrows in their hometown and travel through their screens, and
Wow,
talking
that's
about
interesting. Oh, I like
put
that.
the
I like that.
screen down and you get out there. And he's like, I'm never going to stop. I'm a wanderlust king. And it's like,
Oh, I like that.
yeah, go. It's really good.
I
I'm
dig
getting
that.
like chills just relating about it.
Yeah. And I think, feasibly travel will be opened within countries are opening. Europe's
Oh
opening
yeah,
up.
people are going to be wanting it. People are going to be
Yeah.
like a champagne bottle with a cork,
Oh, yeah.
shaken up. They'll
I
be
think
ready to
early,
travel.
probably like travel is already starting. Like my mom just went to Iceland for a month and traveled around. A lot of countries are open if you have a vaccine or if you have like a negative
Right.
PCR test, right?
Yeah.
Some countries are just fully opening, but I think next spring, next summer is probably going to be nuts. Because like that's when most countries will probably be open. So I'll have to pick your
Yeah.
brain by next. I love
Oh,
traveling.
for
I try to
sure.
travel to
Yeah.
a few countries around the world, but definitely Nepal and Bhutan.
Oh
I
yeah.
might be doing.
We both love Korea too.
Oh
We'd
yeah,
love to.
anytime you come too, man. Yeah,
And
hey,
with
that'd be
you and
great.
Goa too. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be
Sure.
great. Yeah, it's always a
Yeah.
pleasure to host people from other places and show them
Yeah.
your hood.
Yeah.
It's like your new hometown or something, right?
Here's a challenge. Is there a
Yeah.
way that we can tie Squid Game into something occult or hermetic related so that it wouldn't be off topic for either of our podcasts?
Yeah, that is a
Red
damn
and
good.
blue, red and blue,
Well,
severity
you
and
Squid Game, you
mercy.
had that sort of weird almost like where the Golden Dawn has those masks, like the weird,
That's
like,
true.
the headdresses and all that stuff
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
right? And it's sort of, and then there's like a hierarchy of the guys, right? Like
Oh, well, the games are like the grades. The neophyte grade
there
is,
you go. Yeah,
the
yeah.
red light, green light.
Right. They're the ordeals you have to pass or whatever, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Until
Yeah.
you're the one guy at the top who's the new chief adept.
What's interesting? Did you watch that in with English dubbing, or do you guys watch it in subtitles?
I watched with subtitles. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I,
yeah.
of course, I mean, I'm fluent in Korean, so I could understand
Mm.
everything they're saying.
Oh,
I
yeah,
had
yeah,
English,
that's good. Yeah.
but I was recently watching something and it had like a clip of Squid Games, but it was in English, and it just feels weird.
Yeah.
Like
I
it's so
heard
the
that it was
nuance, you miss so
bad.
much
Yeah.
nuance about it, and
I,
yeah.
I think philosophically I became a subtitle person, especially after is his name Bong Joon-ho? Is
Oh,
that his
Bong
name?
Joon-ho,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
yeah, when he gave a speech, I think at the Emmys or the Oscar, I don't know, where he was
Yeah.
talking about the little, I forget his exact words, but that kind of solidified something that I had already been feeling, which is it kind of, I mean, it's an extension of, now I'll step into my liberal white California shoes and be a total hypocrite. But yeah, no, the default human for too long according to the media has been the heterosexual white male.
Mm. Oh,
and it's been people think very narrowly, and in order to be able to consume something from another place besides UK or Canada or America or Australia, they have to have it dubbed, and it has to be good dubbing. They have to have good actors do the dubbing, and it's like, come on, just read subtitles, just learn another language. It's like,
right.
I mean, is it still the sun never sets on the British Empire? Like, are you pro 17th century, British,
Exactly.
like just take over the whole world so everybody can speak one language, and they'll give me fish and chips properly wherever I go in the world. Like, is that you? Like, no. So yeah, but then I'm also another role of hypocrite where I've been here 3 years and I haven't learned Hindi. So
Okay. Maybe that's your next.
She speaks English very well. So
your next challenge, huh? Yeah, got to dive into the Hindi.
I did get the Rosetta Stone thing. I just need to spend my half an hour a day. And
yeah, really just half an hour a day. That's what I always recommend people. Like, people are new to Korea and they're trying to learn the language. I'm like, if you dedicate 30 minutes a day to really focus study, where it's like, these are the expressions that I use on a daily basis. These are words that, there's only so many words that you use daily, right? Or in typical conversations. All you have to do is distill those down, those expressions, and put in 30 minutes a day. In a year, you should be not necessarily fluent, but conversational. And then the more you go along, you just keep building off of that. And eventually fluency comes, right? But yeah, I mean, learning another language for me.
It's an ongoing process. She just learned douchebag yesterday. We were watching. we were watching. What were we watching? We were watching 50 Shades Darker, and so someone calls someone a douchebag, and I just heard her say, she just repeated douchebag. So after the movie was over, I went in and I said, so
yeah,
that's explained funny. Like the layers and how to lead up to, like, okay, exactly when and where you should call someone a douchebag. And she was saying, my female friend is a bit obnoxious, so I think she's a douchebag. I'm like, no, you have to be minimum 30-year-old male and drive a Corvette and be the sort of guy that would drive you to like a bar and then leave without telling you, and you have to fend for yourself. That's a douchebag.
That's funny. Good example.
In most cases, you can be a younger douchebag. If you're a 15-year-old, you can call another 15-year-old a douchebag. But generally speaking, we're talking about older males.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah. What's cool about learning language too is like it gives you a whole different view, because when you start thinking in the language that you're learning. Language is inherently embedded with culture and religion and other worldviews and histories and things like that, right? And so like when I talk in Korean and I'm seeing the world in Korean, it's totally different than when you switch to English, because, for example, Korea has like honorifics embedded in it. There's, levels of politeness. English has that to a very small degree. A
little bit, yeah.
In Korean, you have, it's like humbling yourself. It's literally you conjugate the verb to talk more humbly or, more casually. You know, it's a much
Yeah.
different way of viewing the world, and just the emotional range of expressions in Korean is a lot. It's weird because since I've been fluent in Korean for so long, there's certain things I want to say in English, they just don't have it. Like they don't have that emotion. It would be like
Yeah.
degree of anger, or like, you know what I mean? It's like there's different
Right.
subtleties
Yeah.
that you just don't even really
Where
have in
they,
English, right?
I've
Yeah.
heard about similar things in Japan where,
Mhm.
yeah, like having a natural American anger response to a situation not turning out the way you want will make
Mhm.
them view you as like a crazy person, or like, you know,
Right.
like an unstable, angry
Right.
man, you know, like as
Right.
opposed to just having a normal reaction, you know, like from our point of
Right.
view, like what seems
Right.
like a normal reaction. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
yeah, in India, it's a little different because there's sort of a lot of expression, a lot of, you know, like
Sure.
anger can kind of come and go in a conversation. You know, people get
Right. Right.
passionate
Right.
and like, you know, get riled up, and then as long as it doesn't go too far and it comes back down, then nobody's throwing fists, you know, like in
Right.
some
Right.
cases, you know, if you if
Right.
there's alcohol involved, especially, you know, a bunch
Right.
of guys together.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And it's different there because English is like an official language. It is, you know, it's
Yeah,
not like
it's
here where
kind of
they,
the lingua franca. There are places where they
right,
don't speak Hindi, but they speak
right,
English. Yeah.
right, right, right. Exactly, exactly. So you, and pretty much any city or big town you go to, you're gonna at least English should be passable. Is that right? Pretty much,
Yeah, for the most part.
for the most part.
Like if I want to buy vegetables from someone selling vegetables on the side of the road, it'll help if I can speak some Hindi.
Mhm.
But if I go to the bank, there's
Mhm.
probably at least one employee that they can find that speaks pretty good English, and that's usually by age. Sometimes they'll, if you go to what they call here an uncle store,
Mhm.
which is sort of like, I guess, before the grocery stores that we're used to, like they had these stores where there'd be one guy standing at, oh, sorry, I just hit the mic.
Yeah.
One guy standing at the table, and you come up and you tell him what you need, and he goes and grabs it for you and comes
Mhm.
up. So sometimes those places, they'll have their kids and the grandkids or niece and nephew working there. And
Mhm.
so more often than not, if I went and there was a whole family there, they'd have to bring out the 7-year-old to
Oh.
like, oh, someone's speaking English, bring out, and they'd be there with their smartphone, and they say, what do you need? Okay, that'll be 235 rupees. Okay, here's your change. And then the grandpa has no idea what just happened with what they were talking about. So that's
Wow.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
That's a,
interesting.
that's a trip. That's a trip. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely hope, you know, I'll
And then there's
definitely.
debate about whether that's a good thing or not.
Mm.
Like for example, in order for an Indian person to advance at an Indian company,
Mhm.
that not knowing English can be a barrier. And so there's like philosophical, debates about whether that is good, or comparing to other countries that don't do it that way, like China, or
Sure.
where there's no requirement to learn English. But then on the other hand, I mean, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't talk too much on the other hand because of my own skin tone, but like
Mhm.
speaking pro Indians learning English, I don't know if I should take that position. It could be
Sure.
taken out of context, but I can see both points of view.
Oh yeah,
Like
for sure.
taking advantage of, because a lot of people do speak French, a lot of people do speak English. Yes, it's because of terrible history.
Mhm.
But practically speaking, if you want to trade with people here or there, it helps to know one of these languages. Like if it's an
Right.
international business. If it's not an international business, then that's kind of a different thing, unless it's a tourist thing.
Sure.
If you're going to be hired to be the face of a hotel speaking to
Right.
tourists, you want to know some English, maybe even some German and Russian. So
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. 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 As it's pros and cons. I see both
Yeah, yeah,
both sides of that, you know. Definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I gotta get that Hindi lessons going, huh? Hey, you have somebody to
Because
help you with
India,
too. So hey,
yeah,
good.
exactly. Because India never went through a colonizer phase. India never decided it wanted to take over the world and milk resources out of everybody else. And so that alone is the reason why it's not like more of a competing force, with the big few. But I think GDP wise, it's up there in the top three. Like it goes,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
like China, Japan, and then US
Germany, America, yeah.
and India are all kind of like right in there, just sort of moving around who's number one. England isn't even on the list, you know. I mean, so
Right.
that's kind of fun irony. Like
That's interesting, right? Yeah.
that's always nice to tell Indian people, like, you know, India's GDP is higher than Britain. Oh, really? Yeah. When Britain was a big deal, it was because they had India. That's
Right,
where
right,
wealth
right.
comes from.
Right, right, right. No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Yeah,
I'm
it was a
at to
good.
call it soon because it's getting late here. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's past midnight on this end, but yeah, it was very
What
interesting.
should we close with?
Oh, let's see. Um, maybe
Oh, tell me about the meaning of the name of your podcast.
oh, okay. That's an issue. Okay. Praxis
Yeah.
behind the obscure, because I'm very interested, like I mentioned, growing up and being exposed to all these sort of esoteric things, right, with masonry and, you know, different esoteric Buddhism and, you know, different forms of yoga and things like this, right? So I called it Praxis behind the obscure because I'm interested in sort of the obscure, the hidden practices that people are, the esoteric sides of what people are doing rather than,
Yeah.
you know, the public image of, you know, there's like esoteric Christianity or esoteric Buddhism and, you know,
Right.
things like that. So just trying to get to like the roots of what people are, what kind of practices people do, why, what effect do they have on them, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, you know, pretty much
We
things
should
along.
we should do this again sometime, maybe not
Yeah.
tomorrow, obviously, but in a month or two,
Yeah.
and talk about some of those things. I feel like, yeah, I mean, this was good to like to meet and kind of like get to share the, but we kind of didn't go too much under the surface. But we'll do that. I think we should do that.
Yeah, we could do a.
I feel like we didn't a follow up.
Yeah, we could do a part two. Part two, that'd be good. That'd be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because these were a lot of external things and ideas, and if one can infer our inner processes by our point of view about these external things. But it'd be interesting to really dive in and yeah, because you mentioned, I think the Western, what was the word you used? The Western has emanationism.
Emanationism, right.
Yeah.
Non-duality and emanation.
Right, non-duality, emanationism, and then there's
Right.
panentheism.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And like, yeah, like how do we feel about these things and where are we at with them, and how did they evolve over time?
Sure, those sort of periods, kind of like language,
existential kind of
existential questions, right? We're talking about language, sort of puts an overview. It gives you a certain perception of how you see the world, but also if you're seeing things, you know, if you're seeing things as emanationist or dualist, or if you're seeing things as sort of empty, you know, shunyata, like in Buddhism, right?
Right.
Non-duality, or even in Hinduism, like Vedanta or Advaita, I think it's called, right? Advaita or Vedanta, I believe, is also like
shunyata is yeah. There's a similar concept, but there's this famous debate between a Brahmin and Buddha, where the Brahmin was basically saying that it's all oneself, and the Buddhist was saying there is no self. And And in the Hindu version of the telling of that, you know, the Brahmin wins because they go, well, if you don't exist, then I guess you have nothing to say. Then the argument, you know, it's some smug, stupid thing. But in the Buddhist telling of it, then Buddha was focusing more on the caste system and a few of the other things that the Hindus left out in their telling of that story. But
exactly.
Saying, oh, you're a Brahmin, does that mean that your father was a Brahmin, or does that mean that you actually practice this and this and this and this?
Right.
Looks to me like it's just the outfit you're wearing. You know, that was kind of Buddha's. He was a counterculture. You know, he was a hero. I don't know. I like him. The more I learn about him, the more I like him. You know. So.
In India currently, I mean, because like it's weird because I'm in Korea, which is very far from India technically, right?
Yeah.
But there's like a way higher percentage of Buddhists here than in India, right? It's still like
well, that was
low.
The Mughals.
Right.
Because in those days, the Buddhists were all organized according to, you know, in monasteries, and mostly Mahayana at that time, and Vajrayana was just getting steam in 2 cities, and then had been kind of stolen, like snuck out and brought to Tibet.
Right.
And then further to China, and then Kukai brought it further to Japan, and now it's Shingon in Japan. But then the Mughals just burned everything. And like there's a lot of Mahayana scriptures that we don't have original Sanskrit or original Pali of. And so it's always a guessing game with the Chinese Mahayana, you know, that was written around 700s and 800s. Was this Indian or not? You know, because there was so much Buddhism in China that they were writing new Mahayana scriptures, and then sometimes they would have someone translate it into Sanskrit, and then like find out after the fact that like this was written in Sanskrit, but it was written in China after the Chinese version was written. It's like, oh, someone trying to add authenticity to the thing that their grandpa wrote or something, you know. So it's such an interesting, it's for me, it's like, if somebody's searching for truth, I imagine it would be frustrating and that they would eventually just leave it all behind. But if someone has the arrogance of you know, that I do, of feeling that I already kind of have like a grasp of truth, I wouldn't be able to explain it, but you know, I kind of feel like I have it and it's okay. You know, like it's fine, you know, like I don't need to explain it, like but it allows me to surf and dive into this egregore and enjoy it, and then come out of it and wash myself off and dive into this one and enjoy it,
having
and
that flexibility and not
and then triangulate and see, oh well, this element was here and here. Is that because of a human common ancestor, or is that because it's actually universal truth? You know, and those are just fun questions.
Those are super. Yeah, those are great questions. Exactly.
But as fun, someone's seeking truth, I'd say meditate, and you know, just meditate. You know, I mean, like real truth, like real. Because it's the world is right there in front of us. It's just we can't see it because our head is so full of a bunch of partial truths that are all bumping into each other and making it seem like they're all lies, you know. And but if you can let those all fizzle out, like yoga, I don't remember the Sanskrit, but the first line or second line of the Yoga Sutras, yoga is the ending of the disturbances in the mind, or the ending of the modifications of the mind. And when your mind can be still, and if you have that control to make it so there's not these involuntary thoughts popping up and memories, and that is the mastery, that is the yoga. And then of course all the poses and everything else is secondary and came thousands of years later, actually. I mean, sure, they were doing poses apparently based on the statues, but they never mentioned them in the scriptures, you know? Right. No, definitely. I think Patanjali said sit comfortably. Like I don't even think he said anything about Padmasambhava.
Maybe not until later. Yeah, I'm not that sure about that, but yeah. Well, now yoga is around
1500s. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, now yoga is the mat and the pose. Right.
Patabi Joyce said that he got it from a guy who got it from Tibet, and that he started teaching this militaristic style that now has become the basis of every yoga class in.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've actually heard that before. I don't know if that's true, but yeah.
Yeah, supposedly. But his teacher though his teacher taught a few other people who started a couple of other lineages, I think, but they're not nearly as big as Ashtanga. And then of course Iyengar was a student of his, I think. But it was his nephew, I think, or it was something. There was some relationship there. But anyway, well, I think we should do this again for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We can do a round 2 later on for sure. We'll figure it out, you know.
Yeah. If anybody has any requests for us, just post in the comments below, or write to us, depending on where you're seeing this or hearing this. So
sounds good.
Thank you very much for the simulcast.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and definitely looking forward to the next one for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
You got a lot of culture, you get a lot of travel, you get a lot of you know, like you said, the external side. Next time we'll maybe go a little more we'll dive a little bit into the deeper stuff. Yeah, exactly. No, that'd be great. That'd be fun. Yeah, it's good. All right, cool. All right, take it easy. Okay, you too. Yeah. Good night.